Chapter 1663. Feeling Shue's hands wrapped around his arms, and also feeling Shue's burning hot tender body on his body, Xiaohua's heroic heart had long since turned soft. Similarly, he used his hands to wrap around Shue's waist and stuck his face to Shue's forehead. Shue coquettishly pouted and raised her head. After another moment of tenderness, Shue's face was already red. She said in a low voice, "Xiao, you can be considered a famous figure among the Imperial Thunder Sect's refinement disciples. Ever since the Feather Immortal Assembly, I've always heard of your name. Who knows how many people envy your cultivation?" I'm afraid it's not that simple, right? Xiaohua sneered. Hee, of course. The ones who envy the most are naturally you and Hongxia Fairy. Shue laughed, and her tone was filled with jealousy. I don't care what they think. What I'm worried about is little Shue's thoughts. Xiaohua kissed Shue's forehead and said in a low voice, how am I young? Shue coquettishly pouted. You don't seem to be older than me, right? Xiaohua felt Shue's mood and unconsciously became restless. Shue sensed it and hurriedly pushed him a little. She said in a low voice, it's precisely because you're in the limelight that many pairs of eyes are staring at Myriad Thunder Valley. The entire Imperial Thunder Sect knows that you failed to build your foundation a few days ago. I'm worried about you, so I specially came to look for you. Could it be that you think I can't build my foundation? Xiaohua's eyes contained a smile. Shue pulled her hand out from Xiaohua's back and reached out to support Xiaohua's neck. Her eyes were somewhat blurred as she said in a low voice, Xiaohua still has a chance to build his foundation. Even if Xiaohua can't build his foundation, I will still accompany you. As she spoke, she used her arm to pull Xiaohua's head down. Her cherry-red lips greeted him, and she answered with fiery passion. After a while, Shue said in a low voice, I came out with Senior Sister Sun to do something, so I can't stay here for long. Xiaohua, you can cultivate in peace. I'll help you look at Master and see if there's any remedy. Even if it doesn't work, I can't build my foundation in 50 years. I don't believe that Xiao can't build his foundation. Xiaohua nodded and said, many thanks for little Shue's kind intentions. I will definitely work hard. Shue smiled. I know. I came here today to tell you that no matter if you build your foundation or not, no matter what my cultivation level is in the future, my heart will follow you. Xiaohua's heart heated up, and he was very moved. Shue, you don't have to say anything, darling Xiao. Shue's voice was as gentle as water. Right at this moment, a message talisman was sent over. It was Sun Shu urging him. I'm leaving, Xiaohua. Shue stood on her tiptoes and kissed Xiaohua's cheek. Xiaohua had already made a decision in his heart and said with a smile. After sending Shue out of the Eastern Ridge Formation, Sun Shu was already waiting. He looked deeply at Xiaohua as if he wanted to say something, but hesitated. He only said to Shue, Junior Sister Shue, let's hurry and leave. I'll follow Senior Sister Sun's instructions. Shue's face was slightly bashful as she said to Xiaohua, then you cultivate carefully. I'm leaving. Xiaohua looked at the two and didn't ask what Sun Shu wanted to say. He raised his hand and bid farewell to the two. When Shue's reluctant gaze disappeared from Xiaohua's field of vision, Xiaohua narrowed his eyes and flew back to the Eastern Ridge. After closing the formation, he sat cross-legged on the foothills of a tall mountain in the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden and quietly adjusted his breathing. He only waited for the next morning. When the first ray of sunlight shone on Xiaohua's body, Xiaohua waved his hand and a mung bean-sized fire essence flame crystal appeared in his hand. Then, without hesitation, he patted it on his arm. Just like last time, with a boom, his entire arm was ignited by the fire essence flame crystal. Immediately after, Xiaohua's entire body's 132 million points flashed just as Xiaohua had imagined. Like 132 million small mouths, they swallowed the flames that were burning near them. A heart-wrenching pain spread throughout Xiaohua's entire body. When he looked at the muscles beside the 132 million points, he could faintly see threads of fire flickering. These fire threads burned Xiao Hua's muscles at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. However, at the same time that the muscles were burned, new muscles were generated at a speed that was invisible to the naked eye. The new muscles were even thicker than the previous ones and contained even more things that weren't there before. Everything was the same as last time when he used the Fire Essence Flame Crystal. Roar! Xiao Hua was in so much pain that he couldn't bear it. He roared loudly and maintained a trace of clarity in his heart. He used the incomplete vigorous Vajra Dharma body technique that Hanju gave him. Speaking of which, it was strange. Just as he started to use the technique, the 13,200 little points began to tremble slightly and absorbed even more flames. Following the circulation of the technique, a shadow emerged from one of the little points. Then, a second, a third. Many more shadows slowly emerged. Only when the shadows gradually stopped appearing did the heart-wrenching pain gradually disappear. Immediately after, just like last time, a huge suction force came from the bones and sucked the flames into the bones. The originally grayish-white bones suddenly turned into the shape of white jade. At this moment, 40% of the white jade bones were densely entwined with crimson blood threads. After the bones were refined by the flames, the crimson blood threads gradually spread and gradually 60% of the bones were entwined by the crimson blood threads. It's time for the dragon transformation art. Xiao Hua silently chanted in his heart and used the prairie fire cultivation technique. Sure enough, once the flames touched his meridians absorbed the flames like a fire dragon. The dragon transformation art madly rotated and sucked the majority of the flames into his meridians. In an instant, Xiao Hua's meridians twitched and faintly flashed with red light. Just like last time, the dragon transformation art was pushed forward at a speed several times faster than usual. Xiao Hua looked at the remaining flames in his meridians and saw that there was only 10% of the flames left. Alas, could it be that, in a while, more flames will come out from my meridians? Xiao Hua sighed slightly, but at this moment, he didn't have time to think too much. He activated the prairie fire cultivation technique in his meridians and began to refine the flames. Fortunately, a foundation establishment cultivation technique was a foundation establishment cultivation technique. It was far from being comparable to a qi refinement cultivation technique. The flames transformed from the fire essence flame crystal didn't suddenly explode like the heavenly laws embodiment technique last time, nor did it transform into a different kind of flames. Instead, following the activation of the cultivation technique, it gradually flowed within his meridians and was gradually refined by the cultivation technique, becoming true qi within Xiao Hua's meridians. Alas, until now, when he saw that everything had returned to normal, Xiao Hua finally let out a sigh of relief from his heart. At this moment, the bones that were sparkling and translucent like jade earlier were now almost 60% scarlet red in color. However, the flames were still incessantly burning the bones. The illusory figures of the 13,200 million small dots also left the position of the small dots, faintly showing signs of floating out of Xiao Hua's body. Chapter 1664. Xiao Hua's usage of the Fire Essence Flame Crystal this time was different from the last time. Although he had used the Prairie Fire Cultivation technique to absorb the remaining flames into his meridians to refine them, the flames on his bones and the flames burning his body did not immediately disappear. Instead, they were slowly being refined. As early as when Xiao Hua had fused the Fire Essence Flame Crystal into his arm and ignited his entire body, there was a fist-sized chunk of lava in the depths of the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden. That fist was surrounded by cold and een rocks, and the inside of the fist was divided into several layers. The outermost layer was magma that was like water, and the innermost layer was solidified and turned into a crystal. The innermost layer was emptiness, just like the emptiness of air. However, in this emptiness, there was a trace of a pitch-black collapse. It was the kind of collapse that was so hot that it was about to burn the space. As the flames around Xiao Hua's body lingered, the pitch-black collapse in the innermost layer of the crystal actually moved towards Xiaohua little by little. Xiaohua sat on top of the mountain like this. Flames lingered around his body, calcining his bones and producing virtual points. This continued for 99 days. When the 100th day was up, the rising sun in the east shone its first rays on Xiaohua's body. The strange flames suddenly retracted and were absorbed into Xiaohua's body. The scarlet color on the bones had already covered 60% of them. However, this scarlet color was still somewhat mottled and impure. Immediately after, the bones flashed with brilliance and returned to their original grayish-white color. There were no longer any abnormalities. Similarly, the 13,200 virtual points that were produced also separated from the black dots at this time. They piled up together and formed the framework of another human figure. However, this human figure was much taller and sturdier than Xiaohua. It was actually similar to a King Kong. Following the disappearance of the flames outside Xiaohua's body, the pitch-black collapse that had risen from the ground for 99 days also stopped. Immediately after, at the place where it stopped, the rocks around an inch around it were all burned into gas. The rocks an inch away from it were also burned into lava facing the rising sun. Xiaohua opened his eyes, and there was a confident smile on his face. But after a long time, a bitter smile appeared on his face, and he wiped his head with his hand and said to himself, "Alas, my hair is gone again." Soon after, Xiaohua didn't get up. He slightly circulated the true energy in his body and smiled as he muttered to himself, "As expected of the fire marrow and flame crystal, as expected of a foundation establishment cultivation method. I have only cultivated for 100 days, and this realm has already reached the middle stage of the 13th layer of the aura refining realm. Moreover, the flame in my meridians is more than half of what it was before. If nothing unexpected happens, in another 100 days or so, I'll be able to set foot into the so-called 14th layer of the aura refining realm. I wonder, what's the difference between I's 14th layer of qi refining and foundation establishment?" Soon after, Xiaohua floated up from the ground. He lowered his head and looked at the ground that had long been burned by the flames of the fire essence flame crystal. He used the hibernating thunder escape and returned to the cave. On one hand, he continued to practice the prairie fire mental cultivation method to refine the flames and increase his cultivation base. On the other hand, he divided his attention to practice the exquisite shell leaf heart sutra of the Buddhist sect and pondered over the Buddha Sarira in his Naiwan palace. Normally, when a cultivator practices qi refining, they must concentrate on one thing and should avoid being distracted the most. However, Xiaohua had many different cultivation methods. If he practiced them separately, it would inevitably affect his own progress. Therefore, when Xiaohua used the blood shadow art to practice the dragonization ability, he was already moved. He gradually tried to use the secret of this cultivation method in other aspects. In particular, the Buddhist sect's Buddha Sarira cultivation method was completely different from the Taoist sect's qi refining method. One refined true qi in the meridians, while the other constructed Sarira outside the Naiwan palace. Using some of the secrets of the blood shadow art, they complemented each other and didn't interfere with each other. This young master is a genius. Xiaohua's little tail unconsciously stuck up. Just like that, several days passed peacefully. On this day, Xiaohua's heart was moved. He reached into his body and took out the storage pouch. When he scanned it with his divine sense, he was stunned. He saw that the spatial formation had already collapsed. However, after it collapsed, there was still an extremely large spatial formation under this formation. This storage pouch actually had 2 layers of space. He saw that this hidden space was empty. There was only an arrow-like object that was several times larger than a command token. It emitted a blue light and floated in the storage pouch. What is this thing? It can actually make a gold core stage cultivator take action? Xiaohua naturally knew that this thing was the real thing inside the storage pouch.
He thought it was a bit strange.
Soon after, he took out the arrow-like command token. He saw that the command token seemed to be made of gold, but not gold. There were very simple runes engraved on it. These runes were different from what Xiaohua usually saw. It seemed very mysterious. Xiaohua didn't recognize a single one of these words, but each of these words seemed to emit a distant aura. At first glance, they actually resembled the green seal script, and even the words on the tortoise shell were somewhat similar. Damn, could it be that this is an ancient object? Xiaohua was a bit flabbergasted. What is this thing used for? In his divine sense, the spiritual energy fluctuations on the command token weren't particularly strong. It was just a bit obscure. Xiaohua held the command token in his hand and resisted the urge to pour his magic power into it. With a wave of his hand, he placed the command token into the storage pouch. Damn. Even if a gold core stage cultivator comes again, this command token is still this young master's. Xiaohua's mouth hung a trace of a sneer. Since the meat was already in his mouth, wanting to spit it out, humph, that would be extremely difficult. But immediately after, Xiaohua thought, what exactly is this thing? I can't go ask people. I can't always keep it in my storage pouch. Moreover, I encountered many things in the past, but I don't know what they are.
This is really annoying,
Although these things can only be learned when I travel, but my cultivation is more important right now. How can I go out so easily? Forget it. Doesn't this young master have the sect master's command token? Zhen Xie and Qin Mingwei were able to find the Buddhist ruins in the library pavilion. Should this young master also go and take a look? It seems that the Imperial Thunder Sect's library pavilion doesn't have many cultivation methods, but there are many other anecdotes. Even if I can't go out and travel, I can look at the senior's letters and expand my knowledge, right? This sect head command token can't be used only once, right? Thinking about this, Xiaohua stood up. His cultivation method was very different from others. He didn't particularly care about the surrounding spiritual energy. There was no difference between cultivating in this cave and cultivating in the library pavilion. Since that was the case, if he could take the time to read more books and expand his knowledge, why not? Xiaohua left the Eastern Mountain Medicinal Garden and closed the spell formation. He looked around and frowned. Then, he didn't use the hibernating lightning escape technique and only used the flight technique to fly away. He leisurely flew towards the nearest lightning palace. After he flew away, an early Foundation establishment stage cultivator appeared in the distance. This person didn't wear a camouflage robe, but an ordinary Taoist robe. Humph, Xiaohua is only SOSO. Why is 4th senior so cautious? Chapter 1665. Motherfucker, who is this? I've already been cultivating inside the formation for nearly 100 days. Don't tell me this guy's been waiting outside the formation for 100 days? What if I don't come out today? Wouldn't he have to keep waiting? Xiaohua didn't release his divine sense, but instead released his Buddhist sense. This Buddhist sense was the most miraculous. That Foundation establishment cultivator simply didn't detect it. Don't tell me that the lost command tablet is in this guy's hands? Xiaohua thought. After flying for a while, he stopped again and secretly observed that Foundation establishment cultivator. Who knew that that cultivator simply didn't approach the Eastern Ridge Medicine Gardens formation. Instead, he flew away on his own. Strange, this person. Xiaohua was somewhat baffled. Forget it, I'll just be careful in the future. Xiaohua's eyes slightly narrowed. His figure unfolded, and he used the hibernating thunder escape to fly away. However, just as he flew up, Xiaohua discovered that he had already cultivated the first level of the lightning escape technique to perfection. He had reached the standard to cultivate the second level of the awakening lightning escape. Light escape? Light escape. As expected, it's the world's #1 escape technique. Xiaohua faced the sky and laughed heartily. I've only just tempered my bones to 60%. I haven't even finished cultivating the first level, and this lightning escape has already advanced to the second level. Like this, the thunderclap 9th heaven is definitely within reach. While laughing, Xiaohua secretly recalled the cultivation method of the awakening lightning escape. On the road, he also began to practice the awakening lightning escape. Not to mention that Xiao Hua once again entered the various Lightning Palace's library pavilions to prepare to read extensively to make up for his lack of experience. On top of a precipitous mountain in Xuanyan School, a young cultivator with a face full of unswerving determination was kneeling in front of a gray-haired golden core cultivator, listening to the cultivator's teachings. This young cultivator was actually the 11th level Qi refinement Xiao Mao. This mountain was different from other places in Xuanyan School. The difference wasn't in the terrain, but in the climate. In the cultivation world, the weather was naturally unpredictable. Wind, rain, thunder, and lightning were numerous. However, within Xuanyan School's mountain gate, the weather was also affected by the Sex Protective Formation. The bright spring sun, gentle wind, and drizzle were all cultivators' favorite. Who didn't want to have a comfortable environment to leisurely cultivate in? However, on the mountain where Xiao Mao was, the wind was chilly and bone-chilling. The rain was icy cold and chilled one's heart and lungs. At this moment, Xiao Mao's entire body was drenched by the cold rain. When the cold wind blew, bits of ice were about to condense on Xiao Mao's Daoist robe. Xiao Mao's face was ashen, and his lips were purple from the cold, trembling slightly. Xiao Mao, you've already reached the 10th layer of Qi refining and are about to enter the late stage. If nothing unexpected happens, you'll be able to enter the 11th layer within a few years. The middle stage Aurus core cultivator in front of Xiao Mao was sitting cross-legged in midair. There seemed to be an invisible shield around him that blocked the drizzling rain outside. Even the gusts of wind could not blow the goatee on his chin. But your cultivation level is really quite high within my Xuanyan School. To tell the truth, if it wasn't for the sect master's orders, this old man definitely wouldn't have accepted you as a disciple. Especially when you already have a master to guide you. Xiao Mao's body trembled slightly, but he still spoke in a trembling voice. This disciple understands. This disciple's talent is poor and has made master difficult. Xiao Mao's words were from the bottom of his heart. He also understood that this Aurus core cultivator before him, Yuan Jiming, was extremely resourceful and had endless means. He was also well known within Xuanyan School. However, this senior's temperament was also strange. He never liked peace and harmony and did not like to interact with others. His residence was also dangerous, and the weather was strange. Moreover, this senior had never accepted a disciple. If it wasn't for the sect master's order, Xiao Mao might not even have been able to meet the senior, much less become his disciple. Actually, when it came to becoming a disciple, Xiao Mao didn't understand either. Ever since he used the fire essence flame crystal in the ice cave last time, he saw his seniors, who had better aptitudes and cultivation levels than him, exploding and dying one by one. His heart was filled with despair. However, the dragon transformation skill that he had been secretly cultivating really surprised him. Every time the fire spiritual energy in his body went out of control and wanted to break through his meridians, the meridians in his body were unbelievably tough. Every time the spiritual energy in his body went out of control and wanted to break through his meridians, the meridians in his body were unbelievably tough. The more it was like this, the more grateful Xiao Mao felt towards the big brother Xiao Hua that he had rashly recognized that day. This feeling came from the bottom of his heart, a kind of heartfelt admiration. In the end, when he narrowly escaped death and cultivated the skill to the 10th level, he was brought in front of the sect master, Feryingzhua, with the other two disciples, Pan Hao and Feng Linbua. Only then did he finally understand the importance of his survival to Xuanyan School. After all, Xiao Mao was only the most ordinary disciple of Xuanyan School. Under normal circumstances, it was absolutely impossible for him to meet Feryingzhua. Moreover, on that day in the Yanling Palace, other than the sect master, the other elders were also present. These were all people that Xiao Mao had only heard of, but had never seen before. This was not the most important thing. When Feryingzhua finished inspecting the cultivation levels of Xiao Mao and the other two, she praised them greatly and rewarded them with spiritual medicine. Moreover, she appointed each of the three disciples to be a master of the Aurus core stage to guide them in their future cultivation. Even when Xiao Mao came to this cold mountain with the sect master's token, he was still in a dream. Until he knelt in the cold wind and rain, kneeling in front of Yuan Jiming. Although he suffered endless torment, his heart was boiling with passion. A master of the Oris core stage, this was something that he had never dreamt of. What's so difficult about it? Yuan Jiming snorted coldly. That voice pierced Xiao Mao's heart and lungs. A moment ago, his heart was boiling hot, but at this moment, it was ice cold. See, Xiao Mao could not help but groan and grit his teeth tightly. However, it was still very cold. That kind of trembling that came from the bottom of his heart could not be suppressed and spread to the outside of his body. Xiao Mao's teeth were chattering. Yuan Jiming sneered again, but this time, the sneer was only heard by the ear. How much wind and rain have you endured? Such a simple cold already made you so uncomfortable. The sect master even said that your body is strong, and told I to train more. Disciple doesn't dare? Xiao Mao stammered. If you become my disciple, you will have to endure such hardships every day. Yuan Jiming said coldly again. Moreover, I have many tricks up my sleeves. This cold wind and rain is just a small trick. Are you willing? Disciple is willing. Xiao Mao agreed. Yuan Jiming scanned with his divine sense and naturally knew that Xiao Mao was already at the limit of his endurance. With a wave of his sleeve, a ray of light covered Xiao Mao, blocking the wind and rain outside. Thank you, master. Xiao Mao was just about to speak when Yuan Jiming whispered to him, shut up and listen carefully. Circulate the true qi in your body according to the previous cultivation method, and comprehend according to this old man's chant. This old man will only repeat this chant once. Whether you understand it or not, this old man will not repeat it a second time. As he spoke, his lips moved slightly, and the chant was transmitted into Xiao Mao's ears. Xiao Mao did not dare to delay, and immediately circulated the cultivation method, circulating the true qi in his meridians. At the same time, he listened carefully to the mantra, comprehending it carefully according to Yuan Jiming's explanation, and then mixed it into the cultivation method. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the mantra had been completely imparted. Xiao Mao did not dare to stop and continued to chant in his heart, circulating his true qi a few more times. When he stopped and checked, he could not help but be dumbfounded. In this short period of time, his cultivation had increased more than twice as much as usual. Master's remarkable ability is something that I would never have dreamed of. Xiao Mao could not help but exclaim. Yuan Jiming's expression was indifferent. This is only a small trick. It's nothing much. It can't wait for the Grand Hall. This old man has observed that your meridians are abnormally tough and wide. With this kind of talent, you should have stood out from the rest long ago. Even if you are in the 11th layer of qi refining now, it shouldn't be strange. Why is it that after you went through the elimination of the seedlings, you are still in the 10th layer of qi refining? Xiao Mao smiled apologetically. This disciple is slow-witted. Before the elimination of the seedlings, I was only in the 4th layer of qi refining. What? Qi refining, the 4th layer of qi refining? Yuan Jiming's body trembled. He had clearly just learned about the elimination of the seedlings from the sect master's order, so he was completely unaware of Xiao Mao's previous cultivation. Yes, this disciple was originally in the 4th layer of qi refining. It was only after the sect master's special training that I stepped into the 10th layer of qi refining. Xiao Mao said honestly. Yuan Jiming stared at Xiao Mao, as if he wanted to see into Xiao Mao's heart. After a while, he said in a low voice, Xiao Mao, tell me everything in detail. Yes. Xiao Mao did not dare to refute. He recounted everything that he encountered in the ice cave, and everything that could be explained in detail. The details of the cultivation method forgive this disciple for not being able to divulge. In the end, Xiao Mao said in a low voice. Yuan Jiming's face was calm, but his heart had long been set off by a monstrous wave. When Xiao Mao finished, he sighed and said, Sect Master is indeed unfathomable. My Xuanyan school actually has such a miraculous method. Sigh, if this method could be used, wouldn't my Xuanyan school be able to dominate the Dawn Rain continent? Forget it, Xiao Mao. This old man already understands the sect master's intentions. You can cultivate in my cold mountain. Yuan Jiming waved his hand and said, This old man wants to see, under my guidance, when will you be able to cultivate to the Golden Core stage? Golden Core? Xiao Mao stared blankly, then his face lit up with joy. He bowed and said in thanks, Thank you, master. Humph. Yuan Jiming waved his hand, and the light barrier around Xiao Mao disappeared. The cold wind and icy rain came again, instantly drenching his already dry Taoist robe. Endure it for now. When you really can't endure it anymore, you can cultivate again. Remember, the longer you endure it, the greater your cultivation achievements will be. Yes, this disciple understands. Xiao Mao's lips were pale as he replied in a low voice. Yuan Jiming closed his eyes and ignored him, leaving Xiao Mao kneeling in the wind and rain, silently enduring it far to the west. In a valley filled with red flowers and green willows, water trickled down from a towering snowy mountain. After countless twists and turns, it flowed into a jade-green cold pond in the valley. If you like this work, you are welcome to come to Qijian.
Calm to vote for it.
Chapter 1666. This was the extreme west of Huan country. The snowy peaks stretched endlessly. Although the sunlight was also strong here, there was no longer the warmth of other places. There was only a deathly white, a cold desolation. Everything was white as far as the eye could see. There were no other colors. When the strong wind blew, the pure white snow on the snowy peaks was only blown up by the wind. The white snow had accumulated for countless years and had long been compacted. It was as hard as iron and stone. Even the strong wind couldn't move it. The cloudless sky was endless blue. It contrasted with the pure white of the snowy peaks, giving people a feeling of incomparable holiness. At the edge of the sky, blue and white met. They were clearly separated and were especially eye-catching. Above this seemingly tranquil snowy scene, two sword lights flashed through the sky. The originally brilliant sword lights seemed so small in this vast and boundless world. The two sword lights flashed past a few towering snowy peaks. With a turn, they plunged down and disappeared into the vast sea of snow. The place where the sword lights disappeared was the valley between two snowy peaks. This valley was very strange. It was similar to the other snowy peaks, all piled up with white snow. However, starting from the middle of the valley, there was an invisible formation that isolated everything inside the valley from the outside. The climate inside the valley was mild and humid. A field of red flowers and green willows covered the entire valley. On the two sides of the valley, there were streams of water that flowed slowly down the valley's stone walls. At the end of the stone walls was a deep, sparkling lake. The two sword lights flew above the deep lake. Above the deep lake, between the stone walls of the valley, there were many pavilions. There were even many palaces on the flat ground. These buildings, the rugged stone walls, and the green trees set off each other. If one didn't raise their head to look at the 10,000 years of snow on the towering snowy peaks, who could imagine that this was a place of extreme cold? The sword light receded, revealing two sword cultivators. One was a male cultivator in his 30s. He was tall, had long arms, a red face, and a pair of bright eyes. The other was a female cultivator. She was also in her 30s. She had a petite and exquisite figure. The lines on her body were clear. The heroic spirit between her eyebrows was not inferior to the male cultivator beside her. There was a green flying sword under the male cultivator's feet. When the male cultivator landed on the ground, it turned into a 4-inch long sword and flew into his hand. It was like a small snake that swam around like it was sentient. Beneath the female cultivator was a pink sword that was as thick as a thumb. As the sword light converged, it turned into a flying swan that circled around the female cultivator a few times. Then, as the female cultivator opened her cherry lips slightly, it entered the female cultivator's body. The place where the two sword cultivators landed was a palace. The palace door appeared on the stone wall, and there were dozens of steps in front of the palace door. As for the other parts of the palace, they were buried in the stone wall. The two swordsmen raised their eyes to look at the swordsmen standing guard on both sides of the palace gate. They looked at each other. There was some anxiety in their eyes, but they did not appear to be panicked. Walking up the stone steps, an armored sword guard stepped forward, raised his hand, and shouted, "Dazzling Sword Spirit Palace, please show your disciples sword token." The two sword cultivators clapped their hands and took out sword-shaped tokens that were the same as Zhang Yutong and Zhang Yuhe's. The sword guard took the tokens and checked them. He returned them to the two and cupped his fists. "Thank you for your hard work, seniors." The male cultivator took the sword token and nodded with a smile. "I don't dare. Thank you for your hard work as well." Then he turned around and whispered, "Junior martial sister, let's go quickly." "Yes, senior martial brother, please go first." The female cultivator replied and quickly followed behind the male cultivator. When the two figures disappeared into the shadow of the palace gate, the sword guard sighed inwardly. The sword guard beside him also frowned slightly and said in a low voice, "Captain Song, the two seniors seem to be the teachers on duty at Shuiyu Mountain in the west." Captain Song glanced at the sword guard and smiled. "Your cultivation level is not high, but your eyes are quite sharp. You can actually see the origins of the two seniors." The sword guard did not seem to be proud of being praised. His face was filled with panic as he whispered, "If they are the teachers on duty at Shuiyu Mountain, if they are back, then wouldn't million men at Meng Mountain?" Sigh, that's exactly the case. Captain Song looked around and sighed again. However, his eyes then looked at the holy mountain in the distance, and a smile appeared on his face. "We sword cultivators were born to fight. I only hope that my 3 feet of green light will protect the peace of my sword domain." "Yes, as you wish, Captain." The sword guard's eyes were filled with pride as he raised his head to look. The two sword cultivators hurriedly entered the palace door. The interior of the palace door was spacious, and the fist-sized moonstones on the stone walls lit up the entire palace. The sword-shaped runes engraved on the stone walls could be seen clearly. "Greetings, martial uncle." The two sword cultivators passed through a heavy pavilion, and a few young sword cultivators came up to them. When they saw the two of them, they immediately hid to the side and cupped their fists respectfully. The male and female sword cultivators nodded slightly and walked past them with light steps. It was only after the two of them left that the young sword cultivators dared to take a step forward. After walking for about the time it took to brew a cup of tea, they arrived at a spacious palace. The ground of the palace had a huge sword-shaped stone engraving, and at the end of the stone engraving was another golden palace door. The two sword cultivators came to the center of the hall and stopped moving forward. They clapped their hands, and the two sword tokens turned into 2 rays of sword light that flew into the closed door. Seeing the sword tokens disappear, the two bowed and said, "Shuiyu Mountain's disciples on duty, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming, greet the sect master." Whoosh! Before the two of them finished speaking, a bright green sword light shot out from the palace door and stopped in front of the two of them. It turned into a huge sword that was 5 feet long. Immediately after, 2 more sword lights flew out from the huge sword. They were the sword tokens that the two of them had just flown in. The sword tokens landed in front of the two of them. "Wait a moment, I still have some things to do in the palace." An old voice came from the huge sword. "Yes, disciple understands," Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming respectfully replied. At the same time, their eyes lit up and they thought to themselves, "Sword transformation. I'm afraid Sect Master Ouyang has already refined a 3rd-grade sword transformation." After a while, the palace door in front of them flashed, and 5 sword lights shot out. These 5 sword lights had different colors and purity. One of them was similar to Sect Master Ouyang's sword light, which was fiery red. It also stopped behind the huge sword. The other 4 sword lights were slightly dimmer, and the outline of the flying sword also faded. Seeing this, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming didn't dare to be negligent. They bowed again and said, "Vice Sect Master, Sword Masters." Without waiting for them to raise their heads, the 2 giant swords in front of them gradually turned illusory. Two tall old cultivators with soaring sword intent appeared. They were Sect Master Ouyang Mingxiu and Vice Sect Master Zhang Yanzong of the Xianjian sect. As for the other four sword beams, they too stopped, and four old cultivators, one male and one female, were revealed. Jianchong Mingme, why didn't you guard Shuiyu Mountain? Why did you suddenly return to the Sword Palace? Could it be that something has happened to millions of Meng Mountains? Ouyang Mingxiu asked. His voice contained the power of the golden chime, and it echoed in the hall, making people feel that it was very sharp. Yes, Sect Master knows. That's right. Chu Jianchong said respectfully. A few months ago, a few disciples of the Xianjian sect suddenly disappeared while patrolling Meng Mountains. There was no news. I led many experts to search along the usual route, but nothing unusual happened. However, after the disciples patrolled, another disciple disappeared. So, Marshal Uncle Tang Hao temporarily stopped the routine patrolling, narrowed the scope of the patrolling, and sent more people to form teams. What about the other sword sects? After Chu Jianchong finished speaking, Vice Sect Master Zhang Yanzong asked. His voice also had the same golden chime, and there was a sharp sword intent that was difficult to suppress. Reporting to Vice Sect Master, Yang Ming opened his mouth and said, "The Bright Sword Sect, Lunar Sun Sword Sect, and Flame Bamboo Sword Sect are guarding the vicinity of my Xian Sword Sect. According to the news they sent, similar situations have also occurred. They have taken the same measures as my Xian Sword Sect. Are there any other abnormalities?" Zhang Yanzong frowned slightly, turned to look at Ouyang Mingxiu, and asked again. "Good to let you know, Sect Masters, the area that our Xianjian sect is guarding has never been an important area. In the past few decades, the invasions of Million Mountain Meng Mountains were not initiated from this area. I have analyzed it in detail and felt that this abnormality is too sudden. I'm afraid that Million Mountain Meng Mountains is probing." Chu Jianchong hesitated and said, "Damn it, when did the barbarians learn how to probe?" Zhang Yanzong cursed and scratched his bald head. "I'm afraid it's not that simple." Ouyang Mingxiu shook her head slightly and said, "Our Huan country sword sect has been fighting with Million Mountain Meng Mountains for many years. We know each other's methods. Although Million Mountain Meng Mountains people were enlightened late, but after so many years, they should have learned a few moves from us, right?" "Ha ha ha," Zhang Yanzong laughed and said, "Unfortunately, Million Mountain Meng Mountain's soul cultivators are too mysterious. If not, I would also want to cultivate." Cough cough, Ouyang Mingxiu coughed and said in a low voice, "Junior brother, you are the Xianjian sect's vice sect master. How can you say such things?" "Hee, aren't all the disciples of my Xianjian sect here?" Zhang Yanzong grinned and said, "I'm just joking, just joking. What about Flying Feather Sect and Quilted Mountain Sect?" Ouyang Mingxiu ignored Zhang Yanzong and turned to ask Chu Jianchong. Flying Feather Sect was not a sword sect. Although they also cultivated sword origin, their natal artifact was not necessarily a flying sword. Quilted Mountain Sect was similar to Shi Country's Spirit Husbandry Sect. They used spirit beasts as companions and were considered beast cultivators. Hearing Ouyang Mingxiu's question, Chu Jianchong quickly said, "Flying Feather Sect hasn't made any moves, but Quilted Mountain Sect's spirit beasts seem to be a little abnormal. However, they didn't say in detail, so Marshal Uncle Tang can't figure out the reason." "Yes, the only thing we can do now is to send more people." Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and said, "Stop them with silence." "I'm afraid that's the only way." Zhang Yanzong stopped smiling and nodded in agreement. However, at this moment, a dark green sword light flew in from outside the palace. It was very fast and landed in front of Zhang Yanzong. Chapter 1667. A flying sword message? Zhang Yanzong was stunned. He didn't expect anyone to send him a flying sword message. He scolded. "What are the guards doing?" Cough. Junior brother, Ouyang Mingxiu coughed twice and said, "Which guard dares to intercept a flying sword message from the Xianjian sect's vice sect master? Why don't you take a look at the content? Maybe it's related to Shuiyu Mountain?" Hearing the sect master's words, Zhang Yenzong didn't dare to be negligent. He slapped his hand on the flying sword. Pa! A crisp sound was heard. A purple light flashed from the flying sword, and a sword intent appeared. At the same time, a 1-foot mirror appeared in front of everyone. Zhang Yenzong was very familiar with the sword intent. He blurted out, "Yuha?" Then he hurriedly looked at the mirror in front of everyone. The mirror was a little blurry, and the images inside were not very clear. However, Zhang Yutong, Zhang Yuha, and Lu Weigong's images could still be seen. This, Zhang Yenzong's eyes widened. He pointed his hand, and a sword energy rushed into the mirror. The entire mirror gradually became clear. Motherfucker, where did these two brats run off to? They actually dared to send a flying sword message for help? Zhang Yenzong retracted his hand and cursed. He was shocked again. Dao sect. These two little girls went to the 3 kingdoms of cultivation? Damn it, who doesn't know you two in the sword sects of Hun country? Maybe they will take care of you. You ran to the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. Who knows who you are? This is bad. This is bad. As Zhang Yenzong spoke, his whole body suddenly expanded. Then, a sword intent soared into the sky. With a flash of light, his body gradually became blurry as if he was going to turn into a giant sword. Vice Sect Master Zhang, don't worry. Ouyang Mingxiu saw this and quickly stopped him. Where are you going? Senior brother Ouyang, Yuha and Yutong are in trouble. Of course I'm going to save them, Zhang Yenzong said. His whole body had turned into a giant sword. A fiery sword light flashed and flew out of the sword palace. Sigh, junior brother, you're too reckless. With such a temperament, how can you be the vice sect leader of my Xian sword sect? Oh, Yangming pointed his finger. Then a 3-colored sword net suddenly appeared above the main hall, blocking in front of the sword light. Seeing that the way was blocked, Zhang Yenzong showed half of his figure and said angrily, Sovereign, what are you doing? Do you want to see Yutong and Yuhi die? Come back first. How long do you think it will take for you to fly to the nearest state of Shi? With my 2nd-grade sword transformation art, I'm afraid that 100 days. As Zhang Yenzong spoke, he understood. He sighed and flew back to Ouyang Mingxiu's side. He looked at the motionless mirror not far away and remained silent. Vice Sect Leader Zhang. Ouyang Mingxiu glanced at him and said, You have to remember that you are the Vice Sect Leader of the Xianjian sect. You can't be compared to others. You have to be calm and steady. Acting so recklessly is not only inconsistent with your position as the Vice Sect Leader, it's also inconsistent with your age and cultivation base. My position as Vice Sect Leader was originally... Zhang Yenzong had just finished his sentence when he saw the stern look in Ouyangming's eyes. He quickly stopped himself and bowed. I was reckless. If it's a matter of the sect, I can still stay calm. But Yutong and Yuhi are my sweetheart. That Yuhi has the same temperament as me. Seeing them in trouble, I can't help it. Even if you can't help it, you have to endure it. Ouyangming said, The position of Vice Sect Leader was appointed by the previous sect leader. He knows that you are muddle-headed in small matters and detached from important matters. That's why he appointed you as the Vice Sect Leader. Otherwise, with your recklessness, I understand. Zhang Yenzong calmed down and bowed. The image of Yuhi's flying sword message has begun to dissipate. It's obvious that they are in trouble far away from the state of Shi. If it's not in the east of the state of Shi, it's in the other 2 countries. Even if I go now, it'll be too late. You only know now. Ouyangming said bluntly. The sword masters present, as well as Jianchong and Ming, know about it already, right? Sect Leader, we admire Vice Sect Leader for maintaining such a pure heart. This is where the purity of Vice Sect Leader's sword spirit lies. Chu Jianchong quickly bowed and said, Besides, it's related to our own blood relatives. No one can stay calm. Hee. Zhang Yenzong wiped his bald forehead with his big hand and grinned slightly. Swordsman, quickly summon Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao to the Sword Palace. Ouyangming rolled her eyes at Zhang Yenzong, who was extremely loyal to her, and said loudly. Then she asked, Junior brother, Why did you Tong and Yu He go to the three kingdoms? This, how would I know? Zhang Yenzong had just lowered his big hand, but now he raised it again. He scratched his head bitterly and said, This, I'm afraid I'll have to ask their master. Sigh, ever since their parents died in Shuiyu Mountain, they have been wanting to improve their cultivation as soon as possible. Oh, I remember now. They went to look for the mysterious Ean's spiritual herb. Mysterious Ean's spiritual herb? Oh, Yangming was stunned, and then her face turned gloomy. The mysterious Ean's spiritual herb grows in the mysterious Ean illusory realm. Can they go there with their cultivation? Sigh. Zhang Yenzong sighed and said, You Tong and you want to cultivate the great Yin Yang Six Direction Sword Spirit. What? Great Yin Yang Six Direction Sword Spirit? Not only did Ouyang Mingxiu's face darken, even the other 5 sword masters, who had been keeping their mouths shut, exclaimed in surprise. Yang Ming even blurted out, This is a sword spirit that no one in my Xianjian sect has been able to cultivate for countless years. It's not too difficult to cultivate the great Yin Yang Six Directions sword spirit. But the requirements are too high. It requires 2 people with the extreme Yang constitution and the extreme Yin constitution to cultivate together. Moreover, their minds must be connected, and their realms must be the same. Only then can the growth of the 2 sword spirits progress together. Although Yu Tong and Yu He's physiques lean towards Yin and Yang respectively, they don't meet the cultivation requirements. Oh, Yangming said softly. Yes, that's what I told them too. Zhang Yenzong smiled bitterly. At that time, they agreed and said that they had given up on this idea. But half a year later, Yu He suddenly asked how to cultivate to the extreme Yin level if one's physique leans towards Yin. I didn't pay much attention to it, and casually mentioned a few spiritual herbs that could improve one's physique. Of course, the easiest one to obtain was the mysterious Yin spiritual herb. Sai, junior brother, the mysterious Yin spiritual herb is one thing, but solitary Yin is not common. Just the mysterious Yin spiritual herb alone can improve one's physique to the extreme Yin level. Oh, Yangming shook her head and said. Zhang Yenzong nodded. I know that, but the other thing is too difficult. I was just saying it casually. Who knew that the 2 of them really went? Since you know why they went, that's good. The 2 of them should have gone to the Tai Ching sect in Lian country. After all, that's the closest to the mysterious Yin illusory land. Moreover, with Yu Tong's steady personality, she wouldn't enter the mysterious Yin illusory land rashly. The 2 of them must have thought of a way from the Tai Ching sect. Oh, Yangming nodded and said. A female sword master spoke in a low voice. Sect master, you're right. Yu He is impatient, but Yu Tong is steady. Moreover, it's very likely that the Tai Ching sect has dark Yin spirit herbs. So, I presume that we'll be able to exchange for those things that our sword sect doesn't need. I just don't know whether Yu He and Yu Tong met this cultivator on the way there, or on the way back. Another male sword master looked at the mirror and said, No matter where, how can our sword sect disciples be bullied by the Dao sect disciples? Ouyang Mingxiu sneered and said, Look at how a disciple from the Dao sect is facing 2 disciples from the sword sect who are in the bright sword stage. I'm afraid that he's also in the late stage of the foundation establishment stage or the golden core stage. How can a senior bully the weak like this? Although our Xianjian sect isn't one of the top sects in Huan country, we definitely won't let them bully us. The Dao sect probably hasn't seen the power of our sword sect for many years and has long forgotten the lessons of the past. Vice Sect Master Zhang, don't be anxious. We'll send 2 people to take a look. If they can deal with it properly, then it'll be good. Otherwise, if someone dares to provoke a battle between sword and Dao, our sword sect will definitely not take a step back. As he spoke, the uncontrollable sword intent suddenly surged up, directly passing through the layers of barriers and piercing into the azure sky. That aura was definitely not inferior to that of a mid-nascent soul stage cultivator. At the same time, the sword origin around everyone present surged uncontrollably. Everyone's sword intent was triggered, and instantly, the entire sword palace was filled with sword intent. Even the sword-shaped runes engraved on the stone walls let out a clanging sound. A short while passed before the entire sword palace calmed down, and then a thin and tall sword cultivator with bright eyes and slanted brows walked briskly into the sword palace. Behind him was an extremely tall woman with a graceful figure. The woman had delicate features and revealed a heroic aura. She was like an unsheathed sharp sword. Disciples Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao greet Sect Master, Vice Sect Master, and Sword Masters. After the two of them came forward to greet them, Ouyang Mingxiu pointed with his hand and said, Yuming, Xiao, the two of you have the highest cultivation in our Xian sword sect. We value the two of you the most. The two of you should take a look at Yutong and Yuha's flying sword message. Yes, disciple understands. After the two of them replied, they looked up for a while and exchanged glances. Duan Yuming said, Disciple has already seen it. Yutong and Yuha have encountered danger in the Cultivation 3 Kingdoms. Looking at the image, the surroundings are not clear. They must have been surrounded by a formation. After Duan Yuming said some things, Ouyang Mingxiu smiled and nodded. He waved his hand and a sword-shaped token flew into his hand. He instructed, This is the Xian Sword Sect Master's token.
Take it.
You and Xiyao will set off immediately and go to Meng Country's Taiqing sect or the mysterious Yin illusion realm to find traces of the two of them. The two of them are probably looking for the mysterious Yin spiritual grass. Chapter 1668. Yes, I understand. Duan Yuming kept the sect leader's token and said loudly, I will not disappoint sect leader. I will find you he and Yutong with my iron blood. Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and smiled. You are at the second grade of the illusory sword realm, which is equivalent to the middle stage of the golden core realm. In terms of fighting, you won't lose to the late stage of the golden core realm. The other sects will listen to your words. Make a copy of this flying sword message and bring it with you. With this, even if they are under the Immortal Alliance, they will have nothing to say. Make them obediently hand over my two girls. Even if the Taiqing sect doesn't know, we must help them find the two girls. Otherwise, the Xianjian sect will attack the country of Xi and the Taiqing sect. Zhang Yanzong shouted. Vice sect leader Zhang's words are a bit overboard. However, you too must pass this message to the Taiqing sect in the Meng country. If anything happens to the two girls, the Xianjian sect, no, the sword cultivators of the Huan country will not let this go. Ouyang Mingxiu didn't mind Zhang Yanzong stealing his words. He coldly repeated his words to Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao. Yes, we understand. Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao's expression turned serious. They waved their hands and left the flying sword message image. They bowed and said, We will not disappoint you. Go, I will wait for your good news in the sword palace. Ouyang Mingxiu nodded. Duan Yuming opened his mouth and spat out a sword light. The sword light was like a flying fish, and it circled around Duan Yuming for a while before it exploded. The sword light turned into hundreds of sword lights, and each sword light took the shape of a swimming fish. They swam back and forth like a school of swimming fish, drowning Duan Yuming. After that, Duan Yuming gradually left the ground and flew out of the palace along with the school of fish formed by the sword lights. At the same time, Wang Xiuyao's cherry lips parted slightly, and a rainbow-colored ray of light flew out. That ray of light was like a rainbow, and it surrounded Wang Xiuyao's graceful body. As Duan Yuming's body flew up, the rainbow-colored ray of light turned into a rainbow and chased after the flying fish, leaving on its own. Before Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao's swimming fish sword and rainbow sword could fly out of the main hall, another flying sword message came in. At this moment, the sword guard's voice sounded, reporting to the sect master, a flying sword message from Shuiyu Mountain has arrived. Yes. Ouyang Mingxiu nodded and pointed with her finger. The messenger flying sword flew into the air and stopped. An old voice was heard. It was Tang Hao, who was guarding Shuiyu Mountain. Reporting to sect leader, I have found one of the disciples who went missing. However, this child was already delirious. Looking at the situation, he should have been subjected to a soul-searching technique. As for why this is the case, I have yet to find the reason.
Ah.
Soul search technique. When Tang Hao's voice disappeared, Chu Jianchong and Yang Ming's faces were filled with shock. They looked at each other and fell into deep thought. The sect leader of the Xian sword sect, Ouyang Mingxiu, also had a fierce look in her eyes. She looked at the flying sword message in the air with an indescribable expression on her face. Far away in the country of Xi, there was also a towering mountain peak. It was also a beautiful valley in spring. A snow-white waterfall hung on the mountain wall, and the loud sound of the waterfall was deafening. It covered the entire valley. The waterfall fell into a deep pool in the valley, and countless bubbles appeared from the depths of the pool, causing the water to splash in all directions. This deep pool was very deep, but it didn't look very big. There was a gap in the pool, and the water flowed down a few dozen feet into another pool. This pool was very big, but it was also very quiet. A large amount of water flowed in, but it didn't cause any ripples. This pool was surrounded by peach trees. The peach trees were either pink, snow-white, or bright red. The pool was covered in peach blossoms. From time to time, a breeze would blow by, and countless peach blossoms would fall into the pool. The peach blossoms would float for a moment, and then sink to the bottom of the pool, never to be seen again. Under the cover of the peach blossoms, there was a cave dwelling at the end of the valley. At this moment, the cave dwelling's door was tightly shut. Fairy Hongxia, who was dressed in red, was kneeling in front of the cave dwelling. Fairy Hongxia had been kneeling here for more than 10 days and nights. The cave dwelling's door had always been tightly shut. She didn't dare to move. Her eyes were tightly shut, and her expression was calm. It was as if she had no regrets. With a sound, the cave dwelling's door opened. It made the same sound as the wooden door. A female cultivator, who looked to be in her 50s, walked out slowly, with the same cold expression. Fairy Hongxia opened her eyes and looked at the female cultivator's face, without a single wrinkle. She whispered, "Master?" "Humph," the female cultivator snorted and scolded. "You still have the face to call me master. What did you say before you left that day? You definitely won't take off the spirit accumulation talisman. You must cultivate it to the Great Circle. Now, the Feather Immortal Assembly's competition is over. Not only did you confront your own senior brother for a disciple from another sect, you even took off the spirit accumulation talisman. Do you still have any respect for your master?" Fairy Hongxia bit her lips and didn't say anything else. However, her gaze was still fixed on the female cultivator. "It seems like you don't have any intention of repentance for the past 10 days. The female cultivator squinted her eyes. She pointed her finger, and a spell was cast on Fairy Hongxia's body.
Ah.
Within her meridians, limbs, and bones, endless soreness and pain burst forth. Fairy Hongxia couldn't help but scream. However, it was only a sudden scream, and then there was no more sound. Immediately, Fairy Hongxia rolled on the ground. Her hands were clenched into fists. Her nails had already pierced into her palms, and fresh blood flowed out. At the same time, between her tightly clenched teeth, traces of blood seeped out. Seeing that her clean red clothes were messy and dirty, the female cultivator waved her hand and cast a spell. Fairy Hongxia's stiff body gradually softened, and the sound of heavy breathing could be heard from her mouth and nose. After a while, Fairy Hongxia recovered. She tidied her clothes and knelt down. The female cultivator said coldly, "When you became my disciple that day, I already told you clearly. Our cultivation is the most heaven-defying thing. It's harder than sailing against the current. We can't be lazy. Furthermore, emotions are the most disturbing thing. Once you're tainted by them, you won't get any benefits. That day, you repeatedly promised this old woman and even swore a heavy oath. Only then did this old woman believe you. Otherwise, even if you were also from the Kai family, I would never have accepted you. For the past few years, you have ignored the male disciples of the Huanhua sect. Even that bastard Yin Jiechong, you treated him coldly. I was very pleased. However, I didn't expect that everything would change after I went to the Feather Immortal Gathering. Let me ask you, Is that disciple called Xiao Hua an old acquaintance of yours? Yes, I was acquainted with him. Fairy Hong Xia knew that she couldn't hide the truth, so she told her everything. Humph. A level 4 qi refining itinerant cultivator returned Kai Zhuoxiao's corpse and even gave you the last good fate token of the Huanhua sect? The female cultivator sneered. I heard that this bastard is now at the beginning of level 12 qi refining. He even had the strength to defeat Yun Jiecheng. Do you think he was only at level 4 qi refining that day? He was cheated and sold, and he even helped him count the spiritual stones. Why don't you think about it? If he was only a level 4 qi refining itinerant cultivator, why would he give you the good fate token? Besides, look, hasn't he already joined the Imperial Thunder Sect? If he didn't have the confidence to join the Imperial Thunder Sect, do you think he would have given you the good fate token? Fairy Hong Xia bit her lips and didn't answer. In fact, she understood very well. Others might not know, but she was the same as Kai Zhuoxia. She had practiced the sky-stealing sun-swapping technique since she was young. She was very sensitive to cultivation realms, especially when Xiao Hua was at level 4 qi refining after that day. He was much weaker than her level 10 qi refining. Fairy Hong Xia understood with a single glance. At this moment, when she thought of Xiao Hua's incomparably pure eyes, her heart felt peaceful. She believed that Xiao Hua would never lie to her. You have nothing to say? The female cultivator sneered. You attacked a disciple of our sect without permission during the Feather Immortal Gathering. According to the sect rules, you will be severely punished. If you regret it, I can give you some advice. Perhaps your punishment will be reduced. I don't regret it, Fairy Hong Xia said in a low voice without hesitation.
Oh.
You really don't regret it? A ripple appeared on the female cultivator's face. She asked curiously, I'm curious as to why you don't regret it. All right, teacher knows that Xiao Hua had returned elder sister's corpse and everything else. Didn't you return his favor by giving him some cultivation method? That was your promise. I have to return it, Fairy Hong Xia said resolutely, but I still feel that I owe him a favor. The sword embryo of the Feather Immortal Gathering is a good opportunity. If I don't return it now, when will I? The female cultivator's expression softened. She nodded and said, That's a good reason. However, Fairy Hong Xia continued, Furthermore, even though I have only spent a short amount of time with him, but, Master, there are some people that even if you were to spend your entire life with them, you would still not develop any feelings for them. But for that person, you only need to look at him once to feel his heart, to feel his pain, and to know that he is the one you have been waiting for all your life. This feeling, I can't describe it with words. Besides, Xiao Hua is now a disciple of the Imperial Thunder Sect. If I don't do something, I'm afraid. You're afraid that other female cultivators will snatch him away? That he can't dual cultivate with you? The female cultivator was stunned for a moment before she sneered. That's what I'm thinking. Of course, I have to say it in front of you. But if it's someone else, I will only say that I want to return Xiao Hua's favor. Fairy Hong Xia said in a low voice. You're the smart one. Everyone else is a fool. The female cultivator cursed angrily, but then she looked up at the endless peach blossoms in the distance and sighed. I accepted you as my disciple because I wanted you to succeed in your cultivation. I won't let you take the wrong path. As for my story, as a disciple of the Kai clan, I'm sure you know about it, right? Fairy Hong Xia hesitated for a moment before she said in a low voice, Master, are you talking about Shanghuaming? Chapter 1669. Even after hearing the name Shanghuaming, the female cultivator's expression remained cold. She snorted and said, Even you, a disciple of the Kai family of Luyang, know about my past. It seems that I have quite a reputation in the Kai family. Fairy Hong Xia heard this and quickly said, Master, the name of Kai Qin is not what you want. You are a golden core stage cultivator, the pride of the Kai family. This golden core stage cultivator of the Huanhua sect, who was also Fairy Hong Xia's master, was also a member of the Kai family. Her name was Kai Qin. My actions are in accordance with the great Tao. Why would I care about what others say? Kai Qin sneered. I have told you that if not for your good aptitude, I would not have taken you in, even if you were a disciple of the Kai family. I know. Fairy Hong Xia lowered her head and said, Since you know about my relationship with Shang Huaming, you must know what happened, right? Yes, I know. Fairy Hong Xia raised her head slightly, her jade-like face carrying a trace of admiration. Back then, for Shang Huaming's Xiao Yuehong, Master disregarded the clan leader's objections and broke out of the clan to marry Shang Huaming. After that, Xiao Yuehong became Shang Huaming's sect leader, and Master became Shang Huaming's sect leader's wife. A cold light flashed in Kai Qin's eyes and she said angrily, Girl, is this what I asked you? Fairy Hong Xia's delicate body trembled and she said softly, Yes, but after Master went to Shang Huaming, her cultivation had been hovering in the middle stage of foundation establishment. Later, when Master was traveling in the Xiaoyu continent, she had an epiphany of the Tao of cultivation. Following that, she had the opportunity to join the Huanhua sect. In less than 100 years, she had cultivated from foundation establishment to golden core stage. So you do know about this. Kai Qin's face turned cold and she scolded, I was childish back then. I was trapped by love and rebelled against the family. Later on, my cultivation improved on Yellow Flower Ridge, but it was not the right path. How could I become a great person? Love has always been the enemy of cultivation. If I had not broken free from Shang Huaming's mundane affairs and cut off my love, how could I have achieved what I have today? This old woman's lesson is still vivid in my mind. Why do you insist on following this old woman's path? As she spoke, Kai Qin's face turned green as she pointed her finger once more.
Ouch.
Fairy Hong Xia cried out in pain as she crawled on the ground once more, rolling around in pain. Who is it? At this moment, Kai Qin raised her head and coldly shouted at the sky outside the valley. Martial Uncle Kai, Junior Zhang Li Han greets, Martial Uncle Kai. A voice came from outside the valley. Humph. Kai Qin snorted coldly. With a wave of her hand, she removed the restrictive spell on Fairy Hong Xia and scolded, Yun Jiechong's master is here. Look at the trouble you have caused me. Kneel at the side. Yes, your disciple understands. Fairy Hong Xia did not dare to say anything else as she continued to kneel on the ground. Then, Kai Qin waved her white sleeves and a ray of light hit the sky outside the valley. With a soft sound, it seemed that some restrictive spells had been opened and 2 foundation establishment stage cultivators descended from the sky. The person in front was in the late stage of foundation establishment stage. He was dressed in green and was short in stature. The 2 tufts of beard at the corners of his mouth were very obvious, like the tail of a mouse. This person's face was dry, and he looked even more bitter. Compared to Yun Jiechong, who was in the early stage of foundation establishment stage, he was like heaven and earth. However, this cultivator held his head high while Yun Jiechong lowered his head. Even though he was much taller than this cultivator, he still lowered his head and appeared to be very respectful. Zhang Lihan, you have never been to my Peach Blossom Valley. What brings you here today? Kai Qin did not go to greet them. She just stood there quietly and waited for the 2 to come closer before she asked, Martial Uncle, this Peach Blossom Valley is your place of meditation. Everyone in the Huanhua sect knows that Martial Uncle pursues the way of the heavens. If not for something important, I would not dare to disturb Martial Uncle's meditation. Zhang Lihan lowered her voice and bowed. Then she turned her head and said, Yun Jiechong, come and greet Martial Uncle Kai Qin. Junior Yun Jiechong greets Martial Uncle Kai. Yun Jiechong did not dare to be negligent. He tidied up his clothes and stopped looking at Fairy Hong Xia. He then bowed respectfully. Well, get up. Kai Qin flicked her sleeves and said, Now you are also a foundation establishment stage cultivator. You are considered to have stepped into the door of cultivation. You are so young. I still have to congratulate you. I dare not. I am still far from Junior Sister Kai. This is all thanks to Martial Uncle Kai's guidance. Yun Jiechong said in a low voice. Kai Qin turned her head and looked at Fairy Hong Xia, who was kneeling with her back facing her. She said, "This girl is too stubborn. I am just punishing her. Even though she has the cultivation, she does not have the state of mind. She has taken the wrong path. How can she achieve great things?" Yun Jiechong looked at his master and smiled apologetically. Junior sister was just confused for a moment. She must have her difficulties. Otherwise, she would not have done such a thing. Kai Qin nodded. "You are indeed a foundation establishment stage disciple. You are very knowledgeable." Then, she changed her tone and asked, "May I know why you have come to the Peach Blossom Valley today?" Jiang Lihan took a step forward and clapped her hands. She took out a token and handed it to Kai Qin. She smiled and said, "I have received the order from the sect leader to discuss something with Senior Kai." Kai Qin did not take the token. She only scanned it with her spiritual will and nodded. "Go ahead." "Yes." Jiang Lihan seemed to know Kai Qin's temper. She kept the sect leader's token and looked at Fairy Hongxia. She said, "What Martial Uncle Kai's disciple did at the Feather Immortal meet today, perhaps she had her difficulties. However, she really destroyed the momentum of our Huanhua sect. Our Huanhua sect's disciple could have won the Feather Immortal meet and obtained the extraterrestrial divine item. However, because of her, the Imperial Thunder sect gained the upper hand. Not only did she destroy the prestige of our Huanhua sect's disciple, but she also made our Huanhua sect a laughingstock. The sect leader has ordered that if we do not punish her severely, we will not be able to convince the public. We will not be able to set the rules of the Huanhua sect." Kai Qin frowned and said coldly, "How does the sect leader intend to deal with her? Are you going to expel her from the Huanhua sect? Are you going to abolish her cultivation?" "Of course not." Jiang Lihan smiled apologetically. "Your disciple is very talented. After she entered the Huanhua sect with the Good Fate token, she reached the foundation establishment stage within a few years. Moreover, she has completed the Qi refinement stage. How can we abandon such a good disciple so easily? The sect leader has ordered that she is to go into seclusion in the Valley of Ice and reflect on her mistakes for 20 years. Hiss. Hearing this, Kai Qin sucked in a breath of cold air. The astral winds from the frozen ice valley were bone-chilling. Not to mention 20 years, even a single day and night could turn a person into ice. The sect leader actually wants to punish Fairy Hongxia to go into seclusion in the Valley of Ice. She must be really angry. Fairy Hongxia, who was kneeling behind Kai Qin, also turned pale when she heard this. I haven't even met the sect leader yet, and you've already brought the sect leader's order. This is really timely." Kai Qin sneered. "I'll bring my disciple to meet the sect leader now." "Martial Ant, don't be anxious," Jiang Lihan quickly said. "The sect leader has ordered that this order will not be changed." Kai Qin was furious when she heard this. "Martial Ant, don't be anxious." Jiang Lihan seemed to have a card up her sleeve. She smiled and said, "I haven't finished relaying the sect leader's order."
"Speak,"
Kai Qin said angrily. "The sect leader has ordered that Kai Hongxia made a mistake first and should be punished severely. However, Kai Hongxia's talent is very good and she is an elite disciple of the Huanhua sect. We must consider her future. Considering that she is young and ignorant and also has Yun Guicheng's protection, the affection is commendable. In view of this, Yun Guicheng and Kai Hongxia are to become a pair of dual cultivators. Firstly, both of them can encourage each other and achieve great Dao together. Secondly, we can eliminate the Huanhua sect from being a laughingstock in front of other sects." "What?" Kai Qin was stunned when she heard this. She had never thought that the sect leader would punish her in this way. At the same time, Fairy Hongxia's eyes narrowed. Although she did not say anything, endless thoughts arose in her heart. Yun Guicheng bowed and said, "I've admired Junior Martial Sister Hongxia's character for a long time, and I've always treated Junior Martial Sister as my ideal partner for dual cultivation. However, I was afraid of delaying Junior Martial Sister's cultivation. Even if I could build my foundation, I wouldn't dare to disturb her. I don't know why I dared to tell Martial Ant in advance." Fortunately, the sect leader empathized with my painstaking efforts and took this opportunity to eliminate the bad influence that junior sister has caused in the Feather Immortal Assembly. These were all suggested by the sect leader. I have never dared to use these to threaten Martial Aunt and junior sister. Seeing how gentle and elegant Yun Guichong was, even Kai Qin was moved. At this moment, she had thought about many things. The sect leader's decision was appropriate. He could not only avoid Kai Hongsha's punishment, but also eliminate the bad influence. If news of this spread, the disciples of other sects would also know that Fairy Hong Xia of the Huanhua sect did not hesitate to fall out with her lover in order to return the favor of the Imperial Thunder sect's disciple. Such a character was rare in the cultivation world. But Kai Qin naturally thought of what Fairy Hong Xia had said and said to herself, "Sigh, this girl's character. I'm afraid it's not very possible." Immediately, Kai Qin turned her head and said, "Hong Xia, you've heard the sect leader's order. Do you have a choice?" "Martial Aunt, you don't have to be so busy," Yun Guichong hurriedly said with a smile. "The sect leader has given junior sister 10 days to consider. It's not too late to wait until junior sister has thought it through." "There's no need." Although Fairy Hong Xia was kneeling, her voice was still cold. "Why do I need 10 days to consider such a thing? I'll give you an answer now. I will enter the Valley of Ice tomorrow." "Junior sister," Yun Guichong said anxiously, "the Valley of Ice is not a good place to be. You have to think carefully. Once you enter, you will either die or be injured. Dao, cultivation, it's all for naught." Fairy Hong Xia's back was facing Yun Guichong. Her voice was unusually firm. "It's just the astral winds from the sky. Even if I die, I will walk my own path. I will never do anything that I don't want to do." "Junior sister, why do you have to do this?" Yun Guichong's face was pale, and his eyes were filled with a strange expression. He had not expected Fairy Hong Xia to be so heartless to him. "Xiao Hua. It must be Xiao Hua." Yun Guichong's face was expressionless, but his heart was filled with malevolence. Chapter 1670. After sending off Jiang Lihan and Yun Jichong, Kai Qin watched as Yun Jichong's figure disappeared into the air. Without turning back, she said coldly, "So you've decided? This? If so, why did you do it in the first place?" "Master, a person should have a belief. If I didn't have this belief, I would have been a disciple. Since I have this belief, then I'll carry it out to the end." Since Fairy Hong Xia had decided, she naturally said calmly, "If so, then I'll do it in the first place." Hee, what a pity, what a joke." Kai Qin sneered. "Wasn't it the same when I rebelled against the Kai family? At that time, Xiao Hongyue, who killed Hua Ming, naturally knew about it. But what could he do in the future when I couldn't improve my cultivation? Wouldn't he still be helpless? And you're even better. You made this decision far away from the Imperial Thunder sect. Your punishment will definitely not spread to the Huanhua sect. That little bastard Xiao Hua. I'm afraid he won't know about it for 20 years. 20 years. Even though there's no concept of time in cultivation, the world changes too quickly. How can you know the changes in other people's minds? Even if you went through a near-death experience, how can Xiao Hua know about your suffering after coming out of the Cold Wind Valley?" Fairy Hong Xia bit her lips and stared at the ground, not saying a word. "Even though you don't like Yin Jichong, since things have come to this, I think you should agree for now. Drag it out one day at a time." "No, Master, I won't compromise." Fairy Hong Xia flatly refused. A rare look of pity flashed through Kai Qin's eyes, but it was immediately replaced by coldness. "This old woman will ask you one last time. Everything you've experienced is what this old woman has experienced. Everything you're saying now is what this old woman has said to the patriarch before. This old woman's example will be your teacher for the future. The detours I've taken will be what you'll have to face in the future. Moreover, your situation is even more serious. The Cold Wind Valley, even I don't dare to enter it easily. Your near-death experience is considered light. Now that things had come to this, how could Fairy Hong Xia not hesitate? If one were to talk about what she had done in the bright realm of the Tai Ching sect, it was true that she had feelings for Xiao Huaqing. But on the surface, it could also be understood as returning Xiao Hua's favor. After all, she had said those words through telepathy, and no one else knew about it. But what about Xiao Hua's thoughts? Xiao Hua didn't say anything. Fairy Hong Xia's cleverness was to use an ambiguous attitude to make her intentions clear to Xiao Hua in front of everyone. Just as she said, if she didn't make it clear in the Hao realm, she really didn't know when she would be able to make it clear. Moreover, even if Xiao Hua had other thoughts, she naturally had a reason to explain it. However, it was precisely this kind of petty cleverness that caused her to fall into another embarrassing situation. Xiao Hua didn't make it clear to her, and Fairy Hong Xia leisurely flew away to build her foundation. Xiao Hua didn't even have time to say a single word. Fairy Hong Xia had expected the punishment from the Cleansing Flower sect, but she never expected it to be so severe. Of course, this was just a pretense. The real intention of the head of Huanhua sect was to let her practice dual cultivation with Yun Guichong to eliminate the sect's laughingstock. What should I do? What should I do? Fairy Hong Xia hesitated at this crucial moment. At this moment, in the Kai family of Liang, Xiao Hua's low cultivation level, clear eyes, and the calm expression he had when he handed over the storage bag to her surfaced in Fairy Hong Xia's mind. That's right, when a level 4 Qi refining rogue cultivator faced that storage bag, it was like a beggar seeing a mountain of gold. He was actually able to keep his promise. Keeping her promise, it was easy to say, but how difficult was it to do? Especially when it came to fulfilling the promise of a dead person. This kind of person isn't worth my effort? Fairy Hong Xia asked herself, won't this kind of person have a bright future? Will this kind of person ignore everything I've done for him? A few rhetorical questions emerged from the bottom of her heart, and Fairy Hong Xia had a plan in mind. However, Cold Wind Valley. That's right, Fairy Hong Xia suddenly remembered Kai Qin's persuasion just now. Her tone seemed to be very strict at the start, but later on, she seemed to have loosened up. This final question actually had the intention of sounding her out. Taking a deep breath, Fairy Hong Xia said indifferently, Master, this disciple has made up her mind. As a disciple of the Kai family, I will never regret my own choices. Even if this disciple's soul is blown away by the astral winds, I will never give in to the threats of others. Although Fairy Hong Xia's tone was indifferent, it was resolute and without hesitation. Hearing this, Kai Qin's eyes flashed. Humph, don't be stubborn. I'll return to the residence to cultivate. I'll give you 2 days. If you regret it, it won't be too late to look for me. Kai Qin did not say anything else and flew into the cave. Fairy Hong Xia knelt in front of the cave for another 2 days. When Kai Qin came out again, Fairy Hong Xia was still willing to enter Cold Wind Valley. Sigh, forget it. The stubbornness in the blood of the Kai family is not something that can be easily changed. Kai Qin stared at Fairy Hong Xia for a long time and sighed. She clapped her hands and took out a simple phoenix hairpin from her storage bag. With a swing of her hand, she flew to Fairy Hong Xia and whispered, "Take a look." Fairy Hong Xia furrowed her brows when she heard her master's voice transmission. However, she felt a sense of relief in her heart. She immersed her spirit sense into it, and her expression changed drastically. She blurted out, "Ice Phoenix cultivation method?" Humph. Kai Qin waved her hand, and a ray of light flashed past. A sound barrier was activated and sealed Fairy Hong Xia's voice. "You're already a foundation establishment cultivator, and you still don't know your place? I've thought highly of you for nothing." This disciple is too shocked. "Please forgive me, Master." Fairy Hong Xia's eyes turned quickly, and she whispered back, "This disciple has never thought that my Kai family's a legendary mental cultivation method would be seen here. Humph, how can my Kai family be compared to an ordinary cultivation family? I don't want to tell you these things now. If fate brings us together, you'll know in the future." Kai Qin sneered, "Use a few days to memorize this Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method. If there's anything you don't understand, ask me. This Cold Wind Valley is a place of death for others. For my Kai family's disciples? That might not be the case. Since you've chosen this path and you're of my Kai family's bloodline, then this old one can only let you try. If you succeed, TSK, not to mention Jindan, even Yuaning. Master? Fairy Hong Xia's face lit up with joy. Don't be happy too early, Kai Qin said coldly. This old one is only saying that it's possible. The possibility is extremely small. For so many years, no one in my Kai family has been able to awaken the thing in their bloodline. Even this old one can't do it. For you, there's only one possibility. If you don't succeed, only death awaits you. This disciple understands. Fairy Hong Xia retracted her joy and nodded. Why is this Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method incomplete? Fairy Hong Xia frowned after looking at it for a while. Silly girl. What kind of mental cultivation method is the Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method? How would you know? Wait until you've mastered it and save your life. When you have the chance, you can go to the Kai family's ancestral land to search for it. Kai Qin said with a rare smile. Kai family's ancestral land? Fairy Hong Xia asked curiously. How would this disciple not know? What's the difference between knowing now and knowing in the future? If you can't get out of Cold Wind Valley, what's the use of knowing so much? Kai Qin said bluntly. This disciple understands. This disciple will never reveal it. Fairy Hong Xia's expression turned cold as she transmitted her voice. You're on your own now. With a wave of her hand, Kai Qin cast a few spells and set up a restriction around Fairy Hong Xia. She then flew into the cave, leaving Fairy Hong Xia to comprehend the Kai family's Ice Phoenix mental cultivation method. In a quiet little mountain village, there weren't many villagers in the village. Every one of them looked simple and honest. In a small courtyard in the mountain village, a beautiful woman dressed in ordinary village clothes sat on a crooked bamboo chair with a cold expression. This woman was Zhang Yutong. However, Zhang Yutong's cultivation was sealed at this time. Apart from her threatening temperament and plain clothes, no one could tell that she was a sword cultivator. In front of her was Zhang Qingxiao dressed in camouflage. May I ask this sect leader, which sect are you from? Which sect is this? Zhang Yutong looked at the mysterious cultivator in front of her and couldn't help but ask. Do you think this old man will answer you? Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, You just stay here obediently, and this old man won't do anything to you. You must be from the devil realm, Zhang Yutong suddenly said. Zhang Qingxiao was not surprised and said with a smile, Smart people don't live long. Miss Zhang, this old man advises you, it's better if you haven't seen anything. Haven't seen anything? You don't seem to understand us sword cultivators. Zhang Yutong sneered. If you're not from the devil realm, then you're a devil cultivator. You used your identity as a devil cultivator to kidnap and you used the identity of a Dao sect to do things. Why do you think I can't guess? Then tell me, what is this old man's plan? Zhang Qingxiao was interested and asked with a smile. Of course, it's to provoke the conflict between us sword cultivators and the Dao sect. Let us fight each other, and you devil cultivators will reap the benefits. Zhang Yutong hit the nail on the head. Zhang Qingxiao pondered for a moment and nodded slightly. Miss Zhang's idea is similar to this old man's plan. Do you think we sword cultivators are brainless people? That we'll leave our nest for a small girl like me? What if we have the image of the flying sword message and your sister's statement? Plus, we haven't heard from Miss Zhang for many years. Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, Even if others don't care, what will Miss Zhang's twin sister do? After she does something, how will the Changbai sect or Taiqing sect react? If these two sects move, what will the sword cultivators do? Zhang Yutong knew that this was just speculation and a possibility, but she really didn't know what would happen in the future. Who would think that she would be kidnapped by a devil cultivator? Chapter 1671. Have you ever thought about the battle between sword cultivators and Daoist sects? What would happen to the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountain? Zhang Yutong asked anxiously. Haha, Miss Zhang. Don't forget that I'm a demon cultivator. What does this have to do with me? Zhang Qingxiao laughed. The more chaotic your Xiyu continent is, the happier I'll be. Zhang Yutong pursed her lips and stared at Zhang Qingxiao. After a while, she whispered, I wonder if Senior is provoking a battle for the revival of demon cultivators? You must know that Xiaoyu continent is a continent of humans. Demon cultivators will never become mainstream. Is that so? Zhang Qingxiao sneered and said, all the cultivation sects in the Xiaoyu continent cherish their own techniques and only pass on the cultivation techniques to their own disciples. Even the cultivation aristocratic families, although many of them rely on the cultivation sects and can develop themselves very well, what about them? What's their attitude towards other rogue cultivators? They despise and cherish their own cultivation techniques. How can such a secluded cultivation bring prosperity to Daoist sects? Isn't this what you sword cultivators do? How many rogue cultivators are there in Xiyu continent without cultivation techniques and medicinal pills? Miss Zhang, do you know? In my heavenly demonic sect, no matter how high or low your cultivation base is, as long as you swear loyalty to my heavenly demonic sect, you'll immediately have cultivation techniques and medicinal pills to improve your cultivation base. Tell me, which part of us isn't inferior to the famous Daoist sects and sword cultivator sects? But Zhang Yutong said anxiously, Senior, you're teaching everyone regardless of their background. Won't you be letting more unscrupulous people grasp heaven-defying power? The entire continent will. Zhang Yutong still wanted to say chaos, but she suddenly remembered that heavenly demonic sect was originally a sect of demons. Why would they care about the stability of Xiaoyu continent? She couldn't help but stop. Miss Zhang, you seem to understand? Zhang Qingxiao sneered. Heavenly demonic sect opened the door of convenience for any cultivator who should be able to cultivate. It's in accordance with the will of heaven, giving others a glimmer of hope. If heavenly demonic sect doesn't prosper, the heavens won't tolerate it. It's just a small sect of demon cultivators. What great power can it have? Zhang Yutong sneered. Almighty? I don't need any almighty ability. Zhang Qingxiao seemed to be very talkative. He smiled and said, I only need the ability to help people build their foundation. Didn't you see Lu Weigang? I don't know how long he's been cultivating, and I don't know how long he'll be able to reach foundation establishment, but I only need to stretch out my hand to make him reach foundation establishment. Tell me if other people, those cultivators who failed to reach the foundation establishment realm, knew that our heavenly devil sect had such a technique, would they join us? Zhang Yutong's expression suddenly changed. Wasn't that the case? What was the Feather Immortal Assembly for? Isn't it just to let cultivators build their foundation? But even so, only a dozen or so disciples had reached the foundation establishment stage. The other hundreds of disciples had come in vain. The younger disciples were still fine, as they still had a chance to reach the foundation establishment stage in the future. But what about the older disciples, or those who had already failed to reach the foundation establishment stage? If they knew that the heavenly demonic sect had such an opportunity, wouldn't they have rushed over like ducks? No matter how strange the Devil Path's cultivation method is, it is still a Devil Path's cultivation method. How can it be compared with our cultivation method? Zhang Yutong argued. The world only sees it as a failure. Who cares about the methods used? You wait at the Feather Immortal Assembly. Oh, I'm wrong. Miss Zhang, you came to Meng Kingdom for other matters. Those cultivators who were cruel in the Feather Immortal Assembly and fought for the chance to reach the foundation establishment stage, when they killed each other, did they ever think of doing it openly? Zhang Qingxiao retorted. Zhang Yutong bit her lip and no longer spoke. Right now, her sword chi could only flow through her meridians, and she was unable to use her flying swords. Moreover, her divine sense was completely restricted and she could not release it at all. Although her storage bag was still tied to her waist, she had no way of knowing if Zhang Qingxiao had taken the things inside. Moreover, Zhang Qingxiao's words were harsh, and she could not refute them. Devil Path's cultivation method will eventually flourish on the Dawn Rain continent. Miss Zhang, You'd better stay here and wait for the situation on the Dawn Rain continent. If the Dawn Rain continent is in chaos, you still have a chance to live. If my plan doesn't succeed, Zhang Qingxiao sneered. His figure flashed, and a few streaks of blood-red light flashed. Zhang Qingxiao's figure mysteriously disappeared, leaving only a few wisps of black smoke. And the black smoke also disappeared in a flash. Hiss! Zhang Yutong sucked in a breath of cold air. In the Huan country, she had seen millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountain. However, she had never seen such a strange method of devil path. She couldn't help but be amazed. At this time, while she was worried about Zhang Yuhe, she was also worried about Huan's sword sex reaction. Please don't fall into this devil path's trap. Zhang Yutong secretly prayed. However, she knew very well that if her sister Zhang Yuhe returned to Huan's sword sect, with Zhang Yuhe's impatient character, Huan's sword sect would definitely fall into her trap. Even if it was just based on the image of the flying sword message, Huan's sword sect would definitely make a wrong judgment. Now, it all depended on sect leader Ouyang's judgment of the situation. Sigh, Zhang Yutong sighed. That faint tone was almost going to linger for 3 days. Just as Zhang Qingxiao said, for more than 10 days, no one came to disturb Zhang Yutong. After Zhang Yutong's initial irritation, she calmed down. The sword origin in her meridians could still flow. Although she couldn't activate the flying sword, she could still cultivate. Zhang Yutong only focused on her cultivation, hoping that she could break free from Zhang Qingxiao's shackles. Unfortunately, she didn't know what kind of demonic shackles Zhang Qingxiao used. Zhang Yutong cultivated for more than half a year and her cultivation had increased by a lot. However, she still couldn't find the trick to shackle herself. She still couldn't break free from the shackles. Today, Zhang Yutong couldn't bear it any longer. She looked left and right at the relatively clean house. Looking at the tranquil courtyard outside the window, she stood up and stepped out of the house for the first time. Outside the house was a small courtyard of a farmer's house. The smell of cow dung entered her nose, causing Zhang Yutong to frown. Looking at the crooked jujube tree in the middle of the courtyard, Zhang Yutong sighed. This kind of place, why would cultivators come here? How would they be able to find her? Cough cough. Zhang Yutong coughed twice as her eyes darted around. She wanted to see if there were any cultivators watching her. However, the entire courtyard was silent. Only the sound of the wind and the smell of grass could be heard. Could it be that there's a restriction on the courtyard? Maybe the disciples of the heavenly demon sect let their guard down? Zhang Yutong thought to herself as she tried to walk to the entrance of the courtyard. To her surprise, the wooden door of the courtyard opened with a creak. Just like the door of a farmer's house, it didn't have any restriction on it. Bang bang bang. Zhang Yutong's heart skipped a beat. She felt that this was her chance to escape. So, without thinking, she quickly jumped out and roughly glanced at the direction of the small village. Then, she turned around and ran towards a slightly higher slope beside the small courtyard. The slope was on the left side of the small courtyard. Although the neighing of cows and horses and the quacking of chickens and ducks could be heard in the small village, there were no human voices. Zhang Yutong ran along the slope to the back of the courtyard. Just as she turned around a big locust tree, a warm and magnetic voice sounded from the top of the tree. Fellow Taoist Zhang, where are you going? Sigh. Zhang Yutong sighed and stopped. She raised her head and saw Zhang Qingxiao in a white robe among the thick green leaves of the big locust tree. His deep eyes were looking at her with a smile. Looking at Zhang Qingxiao's handsome face and impressive temperament, Zhang Yutong couldn't help but sigh again. She raised her voice and said, "Greetings, fellow cultivator. I'm just here for some fresh air." Zhang Yutong's face turned red. "Oh, I see." Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, "If that's the case, fellow Taoist Zhang, please do as you wish. However, it's best that you don't leave this small village. Otherwise, I won't be able to answer to the sect leader." "Fellow Taoist, you are so kind." "I thank you." Zhang Yutong smiled and slowly walked up the slope. She looked up and saw that she was no longer on the grassland. A winding stream flowed by the side of the village. On the other side of the stream was a piece of farmland. At this time, the crops were ripe. Zhang Qingxiao saw that Zhang Yutong had stopped. He shrugged and said with a smile, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, you don't have any divine abilities. Where can you escape to? As long as I release my divine sense, won't it be easy to capture you? Fellow Taoist Zhang, you don't have to thank me." Zhang Yutong looked at the unfamiliar countryside scenery, and a strange light flashed to her eyes. After a moment, she cupped her hands and said, "Fellow Taoist, how should I address you?"
I.
Zhang Qingxiao pondered for a moment and said with a smile, "What a coincidence. I also have the surname Zhang." So it's fellow Taoist Zhang. Nice to meet you." Zhang Yutong looked around and whispered, "Since we're from the same family, I have a question, but I don't know if I should ask." Fellow Taoist Zhang, don't tell me you want to ask how to escape?" Zhang Qingxiao asked curiously. "Do you think I'm that ignorant?" Zhang Yutong smiled and said, "I just want to know, why did fellow Taoist Zhang join the demon sect?" Zhang Qingxiao's eyes stared straight at Zhang Yutong, and Zhang Yutong's eyes didn't show any weakness. The two looked at each other for a moment, and Zhang Qingxiao whispered, "Does this have anything to do with fellow Taoist Zhang?" Zhang Yutong finally moved her eyes away and looked at the village not far away. She whispered, "I see fellow Taoist Zhang's appearance is the first I've seen in my life. Although I can't release my divine sense, I can guess that a cultivator with fellow Taoist Zhang's appearance can't be bad. With fellow Taoist Zhang's aptitude, it's possible for you to join any cultivation sect. How could you fall to the demon sect?" Zhang Qingxiao didn't know whether to laugh or cry. She raised her eyebrows and a smile flashed across her handsome face. Could it be fellow Taoist Zhang wants to invite I to join the Xianjian sect? Zhang Yutong bit her lips and rolled her eyes. She nodded and said, "I don't want to bewitch you. If I really meet fellow Taoist Zhang, I will definitely invite you to join my Xianjian sect." Ha ha ha. Zhang Qingxiao raised her head and laughed. Her body moved up and down along with the branches. Zhang Yutong's face changed and she said angrily, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, you don't believe me?" Chapter 1672. When Zhang Qingxiao finally stopped laughing, he cupped his hands and said, "Thank you for your high opinion. I'm afraid it's impossible for me to join the Xianjian sect."
Why is that?
Zhang Yutong was secretly happy to hear Zhang Qingxiao's explanation. "Don't ask too much." Zhang Qingxiao waved his hand impatiently and said, "You should think about your own safety first. I's safety is not in my hands." Zhang Yutong sighed and said, "I would like to know more about the demonic sect. I also want to know why someone like Zhang Qingxiao joined the demonic sect. Is it that important to reach the foundation establishment stage?" Foundation establishment? Zhang Qingxiao glanced at Zhang Yutong, then looked at the mountains in the distance. The sun was setting in the west, and the orange-red clouds scattered over the mountains. After a while, Zhang Qingxiao said faintly, "How about foundation establishment? How about golden core? But it's all loneliness. How can it be compared to family? How can it be compared to reuniting with family? I didn't join the demonic sect for cultivation, but for an unforgettable blood feud. For this blood feud, I wouldn't hesitate to become a demon." Zhang Yutong's heart trembled when she saw Zhang Qingxiao's handsome face flash with a trace of ferocity. She pondered for a moment and said softly, "I didn't know. Please forgive me if I made you sad." Zhang Qingxiao stared into the distance as if he didn't hear anything. Zhang Yutong also looked at the setting sun in the distance. Seeing that half of the sun had disappeared, she asked again, "Zhang Qingxiao, if it's just for the blood feud, the Xianjian sect can help you." "Really?" Zhang Qingxiao turned his head slightly and looked at Zhang Yutong, who was a little embarrassed. He smiled and said, "How can the Xianjian sect help I? Does Zhang Qingxiao know who the enemy is? If they have a name, then it's easy. You should know the flying swords of the sword cultivators. They are much better than the cultivators of the same level. Zhang Yutong was happy and whispered, "Haha, I understand Zhang Qingxiao's thoughts." Zhang Qingxiao smiled and said, "Unfortunately, I don't know who the enemy is. Sigh, this is going to be difficult." Zhang Yutong's face darkened as she said, "Then even if you join the Heavenly Demon sect, you won't be able to get your revenge." Zhang Qingxiao did not answer Zhang Yutong's question. Instead, she asked, "What if I know the name of the enemy? Your Xian sword sect dares to make a move?" "Of course. I can make the decision." Zhang Yutong puffed up her chest, making it even more perky. "What is the cultivation level of your sect leader?" Zhang Qingxiao asked with a smile. "Second grade sword transformation stage. It's equivalent to the middle nascent soul stage of the Taoist sect." Zhang Yutong said, "Isn't that enough to avenge you? Ha ha ha, fellow Taoist Zhang." Zhang Qingxiao clapped his hands and said, "I appreciate fellow Taoist Zhang's kind intentions. However, do you think that your sect leader will help you?" Furthermore, at this point, Zhang Qingxiao's tone became somewhat gloomy. Furthermore, Ai's enemies are two nascent soul stage cultivators. Do you think that your Xian sword sect will take action? Ah? Zhang Yutong never thought that Zhang Qingxiao's enemies would be nascent soul stage cultivators. She couldn't help but suck in a breath of cold air. That's right, a nascent soul stage cultivator isn't just a problem for a single cultivator, it's a problem for an entire sect. Xian sword sect can't possibly face two nascent soul stage cultivators for Zhang Qingxiao. Even if it's for me, I have to face two nascent soul stage cultivators and two sects. Fellow Taoist Zhang, now do you understand why I joined the Heavenly Demon sect? The corners of Zhang Qingxiao's lips curled into a smile. It was indescribably desolate, and even the residual red in the sky could not compare to it. Only the sect master of the Heavenly Demon sect would have such courage to help this poor Taoist avenge my debt of gratitude. Zhang Yutong's heart was also sad. She knew that the cultivator in front of her might not be a nascent soul stage cultivator or a golden core stage cultivator, but the hatred in his heart was boundless. He swore to kill even a nascent soul stage cultivator. This kind of man who did not care about his own situation and whether or not he had joined the Heavenly Demon sect, she was afraid that she could not simply see him as a Heavenly Demon sect cultivator. Fellow Taoist Zhang, can you tell I a little bit? Zhang Yutong asked tentatively. Perhaps there are other better ways to solve your problem? Other ways? Zhang Qingxiao's eyes flashed with a trace of ridicule. She shook her head and said, "Fellow Taoist Zhang, it's already late. You should go back early. Although my sect leader is not here, there are other disciples watching over me. If they see me, I will be punished." Seeing that Zhang Qingxiao was avoiding the topic, Zhang Yutong could only smile and say, "I was just curious. At the same time, I was afraid that fellow Taoist would be blinded by hatred and affect your cultivation. Since fellow Taoist does not want to say more, then I will go back." After saying that, she turned around and went down the hill. She went back to the small courtyard. Zhang Qingxiao glanced at Zhang Yutong's back and turned to look at the twilight in the sky. She muttered to herself, "A blood feud if it could be easily avenged. Why would it be called a blood feud?" Then, a trace of bitterness appeared on her face. As far as she knew, Duan Yuming and Wang Xiuyao from the Xianjian sect had entered Meng Kingdom and found the Taiqing sect, but her plan had not been fully realized. The Taiqing sect and the Changbai sect had sent disciples to search for Zhang Yutong. Even the disciples of the various sects who participated in the Feather Immortal Gathering were investigated. All the sects wanted to find Lu Weigong's whereabouts through clues to prove that the Taoist sect had nothing to do with this matter. As for the Xianjian sect, they did not send any other disciples to question her. Where did Zhang Yuhe go? Did she encounter any danger? Zhang Qingxiao asked herself again. If she can go back according to my plan, she will definitely be able to stir up trouble. Without this girl, the situation is not good enough. Xiaohua, my good junior brother. Second brother has already excluded you from the list. But I didn't expect you to reach the 12th layer in just a few years. What secrets do you have? Could it be that Shang Huaming's annihilation has something to do with you? The Imperial Thunder Sect is a famous sect, but with your talent, how could you reach the late stage of the Qi refinement realm so easily? Zhang Qingxiao's face showed a trace of anger again. If Master's death has anything to do with you, don't blame me for being ruthless. 3 nascent soul cultivators have to be killed, and you, a Qi refinement realm disciple. I will also kill you. Among the 3 peaks of the Taiqing sect, on the human peak, the rightmost peak, someone also mentioned Xiao Hua's name in a cave. This was a very spacious cave. On the cloud platform, Deming frowned, but his eyes were closed and his face was very ugly. There was a praying mat 10 feet in front of him. Renju's face was also gloomy. Although her eyes were not closed, her brows were also tightly knitted. In the corner of the cave, thin smoke floated from an incense burner. The smoke went straight into the air and didn't dissipate for a long time. In the corner opposite the incense burner, a lifelike puppet was holding a jade plate in its hand. It stood there blankly. Its black eyes were like black jade, without a trace of life. Deming, martial uncle. Renju pondered for a moment and said, "It has been several months since the messenger of the Xian sword sect left our Taiqing sect. According to the news from the Changbai sect, the image in the flying sword message was Lu Weigang. But Lu Weigang was driven out of the Hao realm by our Taiqing sect, and he didn't return to the Changbai sect." Deming opened his eyes slightly and looked at Renju, saying in a low voice, "Renju, do you still need to say this? If Lu Weigang returned to the Changbai sect, how could he kill 2 sword cultivators? Besides, he is only a 12th layer disciple, not even a foundation-building disciple. How could he be a match for 2 sword cultivators at the middle stage of the foundation-building realm? Then, I don't understand. Who in the 3 cultivation kingdoms has the strength? Oh, no. Who has the guts to kill 2 sword cultivators from afar? This is obviously a conflict between the sword cultivators and the Daoist sect." Renju shook her head slightly. "Let the Changbai sect have a headache. The Feather Immortal Conference hosted by our Taiqing sect has ended. We have done what we should do. We have received the 2 sword cultivators with great hospitality and exchanged what we should with them. The messenger of the Xian sword sect can't find any fault with it." Deming frowned. "Speaking of the conflict between the 2 sects, it has been going on since ancient times. But for the past few hundred years, the millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountain have restrained the sword cultivators. Our Daoist sect has invested a lot in the demon-resisting valley, so there hasn't been a big mess. Since the demon-resisting valley will be mentioned after 1,000 years, how can our Daoist sect be afraid of the sword cultivators?" "Martial uncle, you are right." Renju nodded and said, "Sword cultivators are always arrogant and unreasonable. This time, they sent a messenger to win the argument. I'm afraid they have no time to care about us. Our Daoist sect doesn't lack etiquette. Our Taiqing sect has sent disciples to contact other sects and sects to confirm that they have nothing to do with the disappearance of the 2 sword cultivators. Who will be afraid of the sword cultivators? Look, the 2 sword cultivators of the 2nd grade of the illusory sword realm have been searching the Dawn Rain continent for more than a year, but they didn't find anything either, right?" The leader of the Changbai sect, Yun Mingzi, is furious. He has to face the questioning of the Xian sword sect and send disciples to interrogate and search for Lu Weigang's whereabouts. As long as Lu Weigang is not found, the Changbai sect is afraid that the Xian sword sect will come to their door. Deming smiled. "Although the 2 of us managed to find the whereabouts of the Feather Immortal Conference, we didn't make any mistakes and were rewarded by the leader. This is a small regret, and the leader has no intention to ask about it." Hearing this, Renju's thoughts moved. She scanned with her divine sense and said in a low voice, "There are no mistakes, but there are some accidents."
Yes.
Deming nodded. "The sword embryo was taken away by Xiao Hua of the Imperial Thunder Sect. This is really unexpected." "That's not all," Renju said as she patted her storage bag and took out a diamond-shaped crystal. "An illusion formation image?" Deming was dazed. Could it be there are traces of Lu Weigang inside? Didn't the messenger of the Xian sword sect already see it? "Martial uncle, don't be impatient." Renju patted her hand, and a picture scroll appeared in the air. It was the battle between Xiao Hua and the Taiching sect disciple, He Fong Yuan. Chapter 1673. After watching the battle between Xiao Hua and He Fong Yuan, Deming's eyes flashed with a strange light. He nodded slightly and said, "This Xiao Hua has a merciful heart. His control of strength is also very flexible. He can actually stop the force of 10,000 kilograms at the most critical moment. Only this kind of realm where a cultivator is at death's door can give birth to a trace of life, and touch a trace of hope of foundation establishment in cultivation. If there was only one, I can also see it as occasional. But the two people who fought Xiao Hua were both foundation establishment cultivators. This is a problem." Renju put away the diamond-shaped crystal and said in a low voice, "Disciple also suspected that this Xiao Hua is a person with great ability." "How is that possible?" Deming said in surprise. "Of course, when Xiao Hua raised the sword embryo, I clearly saw that he was at the initial stage of Qi refinement realm. Could it be he can deceive foundation establishment and even golden core cultivators?" Renju smiled and said, "Disciple also thought so before. However, the disciple I sent to Imperial Thunder Sect to ask Zhenqing about sword cultivation brought back news that Xiao Hua started to build his foundation not long after he returned to Imperial Thunder Sect." Hearing about building his foundation, Deming nodded slightly, but Renju's words made him stunned. "Unfortunately, Xiao Hua failed to build his foundation." "How is that possible?" Deming unexpectedly said. "How is that possible for the second time? This Qi refinement disciple is a genius. He was born with divine strength and can easily help others build their foundation. How could he fail to build his foundation?" Renju smiled bitterly. How could this matter be wrong? Xiao Hua indeed failed to build his foundation and became the laughingstock of Imperial Thunder Sect. Sigh, heaven is playing with people. Deming shook his head. Heaven is the most playful. Presumably, Xiao Hua himself didn't think he couldn't build his foundation, right? Right. Deming suddenly remembered and said in a low voice, "The matter of Xiao Hua helping others build their foundation must be kept a secret for the time being. He disciple knows." Renju smiled. "Xiao Hua isn't our Taiching sect disciple. How can disciples show off this matter? Xiao Hua probably doesn't even know his own value. If Imperial Thunder Sect finds out, who knows how many foundation establishment disciples they can create." Yup. Deming was a bit confused. Renju naturally knew what Deming was thinking. She hurriedly transmitted her voice to him. I've also asked my disciples to try this method." "How is it?" One of them was killed by the hammer." Renju smiled bitterly and said, "The other two didn't have any effect. AI foundation establishment. It's not that simple." Deming heaved a long sigh. Perhaps this Xiao Hua also encountered it. What does He Fong Yuan say? He Fong Yuan himself was also confused. He only felt an endless force pressing down on his body. He suddenly woke up and his true qi began to condense. Renju naturally asked He Fong Yuan and said he also didn't know if it was Xiao Hua's intention or not. Even golden core cultivators like us can't do anything about it. How can an aura refining disciple like him do anything about it? I'm not looking down on aura refining cultivators. Deming shook his head. This matter was indeed inconceivable. If someone could control the foundation establishment, then how could there be so few foundation establishment cultivators? This disciple has the same thoughts. Renju smiled apologetically and said, "Unfortunately, these images can't be recorded. Moreover, there's no image of Changbai Sect's Fan Tong and Xiao Hua's battle, otherwise we could have looked at it carefully. We still have to pay attention to Imperial Thunder Sect's Xiao Hua. Although he has nothing to do with sword cultivation, if there's really a possibility, as long as there's a possibility that he's related to foundation establishment, we can't relax." Deming said. "Yes, I understand." Renju nodded. Imperial Thunder Sect doesn't know Xiao Hua's importance, and Xiao Hua killed Fan Tong. Changbai Sect's Taoist Jing Ru probably won't let this matter go. At that time, our Tai Ching sect might have a chance. A aura refining disciple, if we give him some benefits and he can have a place to settle down, he'll probably obediently join our Tai Ching sect, right? And if we find a golden core disciple to be his master, how could he not be happy? If he can really help our Tai Ching sect's aura refining disciple reach foundation establishment, as shown in the illusion, that would be a great merit. Deming smiled. Then his brows relaxed, and he closed his eyes again. Renju then transmitted her voice to him. No one knew what they were talking about. Time flew, and in the blink of an eye, several years had passed. In the 3 kingdoms of cultivation, many strange things had happened in the kingdom of Shi, kingdom of Meng, and kingdom of Lian. No one knew how many powerful cultivators had fallen. During the Feather Immortal Gathering, the 2 missing sword cultivators had not been forgotten yet, but very few people had mentioned them. Even Duan Yuming and Wang Xiao had searched many places and forced the Changbai sect into a state of chaos. However, they only had the images of flying swords. Lu Weigang seemed to have disappeared even more cleanly than the 2 sword cultivators. Not a single trace of him could be found. Furthermore, the Xianjian sect was restrained by millions of soul cultivators in Meng Mountain and had no time to be distracted. Gradually, the Changbai sect slacked off and ignored Duan Yuming and Wang Xiao. The 2 sword cultivators had no choice but to slowly search in the 3 kingdoms of cultivation. Furthermore, the Xiaoyu continent was vast. With their strength, they wouldn't be able to travel all over it even after several decades. One day, in the myriad Thunder Valley, Helplessness sat on a jade chair with a gloomy face and asked Xiangyang coldly, "Where's that little bastard? Is he still fooling around in the book pavilions of the lightning palaces?" Xiangyang didn't dare to be negligent. He quickly stood up and bowed. "Yes, Master knows. Little junior brother has been cultivating diligently these past few years in order to build his foundation. He hasn't slacked off." Hasn't slacked off? Then he's not doing his job properly. Helplessly, he slapped the jade chair and said angrily, "What did you do after you failed to build your foundation? How did this little brat do it? It's not like I haven't built my foundation before. Can I tell with one look?" Embarrassed, Xiangyang said, "Little junior brother is different from me." "Different my ass." Helplessly, he scolded, "That little bastard isn't even as good as you. At least you built your foundation after 50 years. That little bastard probably can't even build his foundation after 500 years.
Sigh.
Why was I late that year? That Wang Yunxiao was chosen by me first. Why did I choose a disciple with a loose cultivator background? He really made me lose all my face." "Husband." Beside him, Zhuo Minghui asked curiously, "After you scolded Xiao Hua last time, didn't you say you didn't want to see him anymore? You don't want to worry about him anymore? Why did you suddenly mention Xiao Hua today?" You think I was willing to see him last time? If Martial Uncle Zhen Qing didn't have something to ask him, I wouldn't see that little bastard." Helplessly, he snorted and said, "Just now, Zhen Yu sent me a message. His disciple, Wang Yunxiao, has also built his foundation."
"Ah,
"That, the disciple that Master originally fancied?" Xiangyang exclaimed. Xiangyang didn't open his mouth, but once he did, helplessly shouted angrily, "That's right, it's all my bad luck." Just as Helplessly was about to get angry, a thunder sound transmitting talisman flew in from outside the cave. Helplessly unhappily patted the talisman and heard Zhen Qing's voice, "Martial nephew Helplessly, where's Xiaohua now? Tell him to come see me." Helplessly, he crushed the sound-transmitting talisman, and his expression didn't change. "Martial Uncle Zhen Qing really cares about that little bastard. Last time, I heard she even personally comforted him." Soon after, he waved his hand and another thunder sound-transmitting talisman was sent out. Obviously, he wanted to find Xiao Hua. Seeing that his master was sending a sound-transmitting talisman, Xiangyang hurriedly wanted to stop him, but it was already too late. The thunder sound transmitting talisman flew out of Helplessly's hand and circled around the cave before flying back. Seeing that Helplessly was about to change his expression again, Xiangyang hurriedly went forward and said, Master, I don't know which Thunder Palace's library little junior Marshall brother is in. There are restrictions in there. I'm afraid sound transmitting talismans won't work. It's better for me to go find him personally. Humph. Helplessly, in his rage, came to a realization. If he could find Xiaohua, why would Zhen Qing send him a sound-transmitting talisman? Go. Hurry up and let that little bastard escape from the pile of old books. He can't build his foundation even if he hides there for 500 years. Seeing that the 5-year foundation establishment experiential learning is about to begin, let him prepare and go out with the other disciples. Helplessly sighing, he waved his sleeves and let Xiangyang go out. Xiangyang and Yan Qinglian left the cave. Yan Qinglian took out several invisibility talismans from her storage pouch and handed them to Xiangyang. Husband, bring these invisibility talismans to little junior Marshall brother. The foundation establishment experiential learning is different from other things. With the help of these invisibility talismans, his chances of success will increase a bit. Okay. Xiangyang took them and put them into his storage pouch. He said in a low voice, half a year ago, little junior Marshall brother said he wanted to go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library. I wonder if he's there now. I don't know what's wrong with little junior Marshall brother. What's there to see in the library? He's already read it once before. This time he spent 5 years reading it again. Yan Qinglian also sighed. Using these 5 years to cultivate, maybe. Xiangyang waved his hand to stop Yan Qinglian from saying anything more. He himself flew up and used the hibernating thunder escape to fly towards the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiangyang's realm had stepped into the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. He had also gradually mastered the hibernating thunder evasion. Even though it was still a lot worse than Xiao Hua's hibernating thunder evasion from 5 years ago, he had, after all, started cultivating the thunder evasion technique. But what about Xiao Hua 5 years later? Right now, he was in the Heavenly Thunder Palace's star-like library. He was sending a jade slip into the void. Afterwards, he sat down cross-legged and recalled in detail. Only after a long while did he open his eyes. He let out a long breath and said to himself, the Grand Universe Shifting Command. That command era was actually the incomplete Grand Universe Shifting Command. If I hadn't read the records of the 8 Great Thunder Palaces, how would I have been able to deduce it? The records of the 8 Great Thunder Palaces' ancient books are also strange. Cultivation techniques and the like are divided into realms, but travel notes, strange stories, and the like are not divided into realms. Anyone who can enter the library can read it. But I have read these ancient books for 5 years, and actually, I haven't met a single disciple who came to look at them. Could it be that they don't know that reading an ancient book is equivalent to traveling once? Xiao Hua also didn't feel any pain. 5 years? How good would it be to use it to cultivate? Who would waste 5 years of time to read some ancient book for no reason? Even when Zhen Xie and the others examined the ruins of the Buddhist sect, they were also cultivating. After all, they didn't have fire essence flame crystals, right? Chapter 1674. With the fire marrow flame crystal, Xiao Hua's cultivation method and speed were naturally different from others. After he failed to build his foundation, he relied on the prairie fire cultivation method to enter the 13th layer of the aura refining realm that no one had ever cultivated before. After only 200 or so days, he broke through another bottleneck and entered the so-called 14th layer of the aura refining realm. Afterwards, he used more than a year to refine the last flame in his meridians and reached the bottleneck of the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. Afterwards, he returned to the Eastern Ridge Medicinal Garden and used the second fire marrow flame crystal to break through to the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. Only then did he leave the medicinal garden and finish reading the remaining ancient books in the Thunder Palace while raising his cultivation level to the late stage of the 15th layer of the aura refining realm. He believed that in less than a year, he would be able to step foot into the 16th layer of the aura refining realm. However, as his cultivation level increased, the refining speed of the fire marrow flame crystal slowed down. However, Xiao Hua didn't mind. He knew that his real refining speed didn't slow down at all. It was just that after his cultivation level increased, it would be difficult to advance further. From the 10th layer of the aura refining realm to the 11th layer of the aura refining realm, it would definitely take longer than from the 11th layer to the 12th layer of the aura refining realm. Therefore, he could peacefully enjoy the joy of cultivation. Naturally, Xiao Hua was still in the aura refining realm, so he definitely didn't have any spiritual pressure. Moreover, Xiao Hua had cultivated a concealment technique, so he only needed to disguise himself slightly. From the outside, his cultivation level was no different from an ordinary late-stage 12th layer disciple. As for his true cultivation level, could a cultivator who had cultivated more than half of a foundation-building technique be compared to an aura refining realm cultivator? If he wanted to compare, he could only compare with the foundation-building cultivator. Xiao Hua put the jade slip back, looked around, and grabbed it from somewhere in the sea of stars. Afterwards, his figure flew into the distance. When he arrived at a place covered in mist, he pointed his finger again. The mist was diluted a lot, revealing a lot of rhombus-shaped brilliance. These rhombus-shaped brilliances flashed in two colors, dark green and earthy yellow. Xiao Hua swept his gaze over them and flew towards one of the earthy yellow brilliances. Strangely, as Xiao Hua flew closer to the mist, his whole body gradually shrank. When he entered the mist, he was almost as small as a mung bean. The earthy yellow brilliance in front of him had already enlarged. It was a quiet room. Xiao Hua skillfully formed a seal and entered the quiet room. Soon after, he closed the quiet room. Xiao Hua looked at it for a moment and suddenly, joy appeared on his face. He slapped his forehead, and a sword pellet the size of a chicken egg appeared in his hand. At this time, the sword pellet was different from a few years ago. When Xiao Hua obtained the sword pellet, the surface of the oval sword pellet was bumpy. There were many cracks, and the cracks were quite deep. But at this moment, the entire sword pellet surface was smooth and tidy. All the cracks had disappeared, and there was a faint brilliance flowing on the sword pellet. It looked very lively. Strange. I thought the smallest sword pellet would be the easiest to repair, but I didn't expect the largest sword pellet to be repaired first. Xiao Hua's Buddhist consciousness swept across the Buddha heart of the Buddha relic, and he was a little surprised. Furthermore, the degree of repair of the other 8 sword pellets is also different. It seems that the smaller the sword pellets, the harder it is to repair. The smallest sword pellet had a crack that went deep into the pellet's heart. It didn't change at all. Could it be that the smaller the sword orb is, the more powerful it is? Xiao Hua frowned slightly and looked at the sword pellet in his hand that was emitting a mixture of blood red and azure light. He did his best to immerse his Buddhist consciousness into it. In these 5 years, Xiao Hua had also been cultivating the exquisite leaf scripture. His Buddhist consciousness had naturally improved by leaps and bounds. However, the cultivation of Buddhist consciousness was too difficult. This improvement was truly insignificant compared to the Tao sect realm. The azure and red sword pellet spun around in Xiao Hua's hand. In his Buddhist consciousness, the sword pellet's quality was meticulous, and there were countless strange runes inside. However, these runes were very dull and didn't have the liveliness of the spirit sword described in the sword sect's secret books. Alas, this flying sword is still inferior. Xiao Hua withdrew his Buddhist consciousness and threw the sword pellet into the air. He sighed in his heart. If I really succeed in nurturing a sword, it's like the birth of a life. The sword spirit inside is just born. Even if it's not as lively as a living being, it still has the fluctuations of a living being. This sword pellet has already reached the stage of nurturing a sword, but it doesn't have the slightest bit of liveliness. According to sword cultivators, it should be stillborn. Forget it. I'm not a sword cultivator in the first place. It's already enough to have a flying sword. Using this flying sword together with the Tao sect's sword controlling technique can also be considered average. Xiao Hua thought and extended his finger. He didn't seem to make any movements, but the black iron needle suddenly appeared in midair before his eyes. Then, it suddenly pierced toward Xiao Hua's extended finger. Unfortunately, it was like piercing black iron of the same quality. The black iron needle only pierced a little and couldn't pierce any further. Damn it! Xiao Hua scolded jokingly. This great strength Vajra technique is strange. My body originally had rough skin and thick flesh, but now I can't even drip a drop of blood. And nurturing a sword requires a cultivator's blood essence. This is making things difficult for me. While joking and scolding, Xiao Hua twisted his hand and urged his magic power. The black iron needle flashed with a cold light, then slowly pierced into Xiao Hua's finger. Immediately after, the black iron needle was pulled out, and a drop of blood-red blood floated in midair. Xiao Hua slightly closed his eyes and muttered something. Different spells entered the drop of blood in his hands. The drop of blood started to boil, and in the blink of an eye, it turned into a blood membrane the size of a chicken egg. Quick! Xiao Hua fiercely opened his eyes and pointed his finger. A golden brilliance flashed on the blood membrane and flew towards the sword pellet at the side. The blood membrane wrapped around the sword pellet and quickly seeped into it. Following the disappearance of the blood membrane, the sword pellet started to gradually vibrate up and down. Moreover, the vibrations became more and more intense. A trace of apprehension flashed through Xiao Hua's eyes. He knew that this was the beginning of his blood essence controlling the sword pellet. If the sword pellet wasn't completely repaired, or if his blood essence couldn't control the sword pellet, then the flying sword couldn't be nurtured. Moreover, looking at the way the sword pellet was vibrating up and down, he was afraid that there were traces of the original owner nurturing the sword inside. After a moment, there was another buzzing sound, and the sword pellet suddenly stopped. Soon after, a drop of tainted blood was forced out. As soon as the tainted blood flew out of the sword pellet, it immediately rushed towards Xiao Hua.
Ouch!
Xiao Hua was shocked. His Buddhist sense swept over, and a vicious aura came from the tainted blood. It felt very powerful. Without hesitation, Xiao Hua dodged and immediately called Goldie out from the space. As soon as Goldie came out of the space, its nose twitched, and its eyes were filled with joy. Goldie's nose twitched again, and a white brilliance came out of Goldie's nose, covering the tainted blood. The tainted blood seemed to know the power of the white light and hurriedly tried to change direction. Unfortunately, under the powerful suction of the white light, the tainted blood couldn't move at all. In the blink of an eye, a strange shadow was pulled out from the tainted blood by the white light. Before Xiao Hua could see it clearly, it was sucked into Goldie's nose. After eating the shadow, Goldie's face showed a trace of satisfaction. It actually shook its tail and stretched out its claws, looking like it was stretching its waist. After Xiao Hua sent Goldie into the space, Goldie lay down as if it had fallen asleep, just like when it first swallowed Kenmingwei's primordial spirit. That was close. Xiao Hua wiped the cold sweat from his forehead and rejoiced. Fortunately, I've read so many ancient books these past few years and know that these are all imprints related to the primordial spirit. Only special divine abilities or strange beasts like Goldie can restrain them. Otherwise, it would be really troublesome. But I'm still inexperienced. I started nurturing the sword without making any preparations. This isn't a new sword pellet, but someone else used it before and it's even damaged. This shadow in the tainted blood. I wonder if it was originally a sword cultivator or a soul cultivator injured by this sword cultivator's flying sword. Xiao Hua began to reflect on his own shortcomings. Soon after, he waved his hand, and a wisp of pure, jade-green samadhi true fire was emitted from his hand. It burned the blood that had stopped in midair and disappeared without a trace. Looking at the sword pellet that was emitting a buzzing sound, the sound was extremely ear-piercing. In the sound, two faint wings seemed to unfold on both sides of the sword pellet, but when Xiao Hua wanted to take a closer look, the wings disappeared. Moreover, the entire sword pellet was like a melted candle, gradually softening into a palm-sized sword shape. Following the formation of the flying sword, Xiao Hua's eyes showed joy. He saw that the new flying sword was green and red, and a baleful aura and a sharp aura intertwined together. It was far more powerful than the flying sword Xiao Hua had seen before. What made Xiao Hua even happier was that once this flying sword was born, he felt a kind of free and easy control from the bottom of his heart, a kind of feeling like an arm was born. Even if it's not a spirit sword, even if there's no sword origin, Ai's sword is still enough for me. Xiao Hua laughed heartily and waved his hand. The flying sword suddenly turned around and flew into Xiao Hua's hand like a small snake that had intelligence. When the flying sword landed in his hand, a kind of sometimes boiling hot and sometimes cold feeling came from his hand, unconsciously causing Xiao Hua to frown slightly. What's going on? Xiao Hua closed his eyes tightly and carefully savored the sensation. After a long while, he muttered, "This coldness seems to be a sharp feeling, and it is transmitted to my skin. And this boiling hot, burning feeling doesn't seem to be purely coming from my skin. It feels more like a kind of fear in my heart." Xiao Hua suddenly had a kind of enlightenment. This is probably the power of karma that Master and Master's wife talked about.
Go.
Xiao Hua pointed his finger, and the flying sword flew into the air. It was much faster than the flying sword talisman Xiao Hua used before. Seeing the flying sword move somewhat clumsily in the air under his control, Xiao Hua slightly shook his head. A flying sword talisman is a flying sword talisman. It's really different from a flying sword. I'm afraid that the Dao Sect's flying sword technique is different from the sword cultivator's sword control technique. Unfortunately, I don't know when I'll be able to obtain the sword control technique. Just at this moment, a wave of confusion suddenly appeared in front of Xiao Hua's eyes. Chapter 1675. Speaking of which, Xiao Hua's eyes suddenly appeared perplexed. His eyes were no longer staring at the flying sword in the air. At this moment, a set of sword-controlling technique appeared in Xiao Hua's mind. Countless images and countless words gushed out from unknown places and were deeply engraved in his memory. Sword playing the world. The bewilderment in Xiao Hua's eyes gradually disappeared and was replaced by a deep joy. Soon after, he closed his eyes again. After a long while, he still didn't make any movements, but the flying sword in front of him that had stopped long ago suddenly flew again. At this time, its speed was many times faster than before, and its flight path was much more mysterious. Swoosh! While the flying sword was flying, it suddenly turned into two sword lights. The flying swords in these two sword lights were exactly the same. The two flying swords flew for a moment and transformed again. This time, it turned into four again. In the time it took to drink a cup of tea, the entire quiet room actually produced 8 sword lights that continuously danced around Xiao Hua's surroundings. "Gather!" Xiao Hua shouted. The 8 sword lights converged into one place, and once again turned into a green-red flying sword that stopped in front of him. Hee, this is the true sword-controlling technique. The corner of Xiao Hua's mouth rose, and he had a trace of pride. Sword playing the world has 9 levels. I'm currently only at the first level. There are also 9 sword orbs, and there are still 8 that haven't been nurtured. Could it be that in the unseen world, these 9 sword orbs were born for this sword playing the world? If I can really master this sword playing the world and nurture all 9 sword orbs, I'm afraid I can really control the sword under the world. Xiao Hua's gaze looked at the flying sword again, and he thought, the sword has a name. My flying sword also needs a name, but I don't know what to call it. Just as this thought appeared, Chasing Dream jumped out of his mind again. Chasing Dream? Xiao Hua slightly frowned. Chasing dreams? Too childish. Thinking about how he was attacked by the heart demon several years ago, Xiao Hua's eyes slightly flashed with a cold light, and he muttered, "Why don't we call it Chasing Dream? Killing all the nightmares." Thinking here, Xiao Hua's heart jumped for no reason, and an indescribable palpitation rose in his heart. Whoosh whoosh. Without waiting for Xiao Hua to think carefully, The entire quiet room actually made a sound like a tide, and the entire restriction began to shake.
Eh.
A message from a disciple on duty in the library? Xiaohua was stunned. He glanced at the dream executioner and opened his mouth. The dream executioner flew into Xiaohua's mouth and was kept into his Buddha heart. He continued to burn it with a Tai green qi and infinite karmic fire. When Xiaohua came out of the quiet room, a middle-stage foundation establishment robust man was standing in front of the door. He looked Xiaohua up and down and asked, "Are you Xiaohua of the Thunderclap Palace?" Disciple is indeed Xiaohua. Greetings to Senior. Xiaohua bowed in salute. May I know why Senior is looking for this disciple? Your eldest senior brother came to find you. He said it was urgent. The brawny man said, Go out and take a look. As soon as he finished speaking, he didn't wait for Xiaohua to answer before his figure flashed slightly, and then a ball of indistinct clouds appeared beneath his feet before it carried him up into the starry sky and vanished. Eldest senior brother? Xiaohua frowned even more. He knew that in the past 5 years, he had only gone to the myriad Thunder Valley a few times, but Helplessness had refused to see him. The only time he had seen Helplessness and Xiangyang was when the Taiching sect had sent a disciple to ask about the sword cultivators of the Xianjian sect. However, Helplessness had ignored Xiaohua and had a look of disappointment on his face. This made Xiaohua's heart go cold. What's the matter this time? It can't be that Master is being merciful and wants to see this good-for-nothing disciple of mine. Xiaohua laughed self-deprecatingly. The path of cultivation that he had walked was truly shocking, and it was different from the cultivation of ordinary people. There was no reason for him to talk about it with others. This kind of loneliness, this kind of indifference, he could only taste and understand it himself. Xiaohua placed the jade slip in his hand into the starry sky, then left the library and arrived outside the main hall of the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiangyang was a disciple of the Thunderclap Palace, and without the Heavenly Thunder Palace's token, he couldn't enter the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Seeing Xiaohua come out, Xiangyang's face relaxed. Eldest senior brother, is Master looking for me? Xiaohua smiled and greeted him. Cough, cough, Xiangyang coughed and said in a low voice, It's not Master looking for you. It's Senior Zhen Qing from the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Senior Zhen? Xiaohua was slightly stunned. At the same time, there was a trace of disappointment in his heart. Then I'll go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace. Xiaohua bowed and said, Let's go. I'll accompany you. Xiangyang said with a smile and pulled Xiaohua's sleeve. Eldest senior brother, your cultivation is more important. I'll go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace myself. Xiaohua knew that Xiangyang had spent too much time in the early stage of foundation establishment. Although he didn't know his exact age, he still used 50 years to reach foundation establishment. In the 200 years of a foundation establishment cultivator's lifespan, he might not be able to cultivate into Jindan. If he couldn't cultivate into Jindan, it would be impossible to extend his lifespan. Therefore, for Xiangyang, every moment was precious. Xiangyang knew what Xiaohua meant and said with a smile, I've encountered a bottleneck in my cultivation these past few days. Even if I cultivate bitterly, I still can't break through. It's better to come out and walk around. Xiaohua also didn't know whether what Xiangyang said was true or not, so he could only nod and follow Xiangyang's hibernating thunder escape. He also flew behind Xiangyang. Not long after Xiaohua left, a disciple of the Heavenly Thunder Palace came out of the main hall. Looking at the direction Xiaohua flew in, he clapped his hand and sent out a thunder sound transmitting talisman, then flew in another direction. After flying for a while, Xiangyang couldn't help but turn his head and ask, Little junior brother, recently, how's your cultivation? Thank you for your concern, eldest senior brother. Everything is normal. Xiaohua smiled and told the truth. Xiangyang naturally didn't think so and said, Actually, when you encounter a bottleneck, it's naturally good to look for ancient books or look at other cultivation methods, but you can't always look at them. Cultivating behind closed doors isn't the way of cultivation. Little junior brother, you should still cultivate in places with abundant spiritual energy, like before. Yes, I know. Xiao Huan naturally nodded. In addition, your cultivation can increase at this time. You should still go out and experience more. Maybe you'll encounter an opportunity to reach Foundation establishment just like the Feather Immortal Assembly. Hearing this, Xiao Hua's heart moved. Sure enough, Xiangyang said, for disciples who are at the late stage of the 12th layer of qi refining but can't reach Foundation establishment, my Imperial Thunder Sect will give them the opportunity to experience the world every 5 years. If little junior brother feels that you can't make any progress in Imperial Thunder Sect, you can go out and experience the world. Xiao Hua didn't need to experience the world. What he lacked now was time to refine the Fire Essence Flame Crystal and finish the so-called 18th layer of qi refining as soon as possible so that he could reach Foundation establishment as soon as possible. Yes, thank you for your reminder, eldest senior brother. I will consider it, Xiao Hua replied, but his tone was careless. Xiangyang also knew that his little junior brother, who was born as a loose cultivator, had his own ideas and his words might not be effective. He sighed in his heart and clapped his hands, taking out a few invisibility talismans and handing them over. He said, "This was refined by your senior sister.
Keep it.
It'll be useful for your future experience." Looking at the precious invisibility talismans, Xiao Hua's heart felt warm. He took them and said, "Thank you, senior sister and eldest senior brother. After I meet Senior Jen, I will take care of the matter of my experience. I definitely won't disappoint senior sister."
Good.
Xiangyang said with a smile, "It's not that senior sister and eldest senior brother are forcing you to go out. After all, you won't make any progress if you stay in the Eastern Ridge and the Book Collection Pavilion. Moreover, you must be careful when you go out to experience the world. Is there any organization for this 5 years of Foundation establishment training? Or is there any fixed place in my Imperial Thunder Sect?" Xiao Hua knew that even if he didn't go, Sun Shu would probably ask him to go. He had promised her at the Feather Immortal Assembly, but at that time, he only thought that he would be able to build his foundation after returning to the Imperial Thunder Sect. He didn't expect that he would reach the 18th layer of the qi refining realm. This outside experience is different from the Feather Immortal Assembly. You just have to report to your respective Thunder Palace. If there were any senior or junior brothers that they were familiar with, they could go together and no one would question them. As for the place to experience the world, the Xiaoyu continent is fine. As long as you feel that there's an opportunity to build your foundation, you can go there, Xiangyang explained. However, before you go out, you still have to consider your own cultivation. If it's too dangerous, it's better not to go. Xiao Hua nodded. After flying for a while, he said in a low voice, "What about Master? How has he been recently?" Xiangyang bit his lip. With a somewhat gloomy expression, he told him what happened a few days ago.
Oh?
Eldest senior brother came to the Heavenly Thunder Palace a few days ago? That Wang Yunxiao also built his foundation? Xiao Hua was somewhat surprised. That's right. The Heavenly Thunder Palace can't be compared to the Deafening Thunder Palace. Moreover, you're in the Book Collection Pavilion. Ordinary people can't enter. I only asked a warm-hearted senior brother to call you out. Thank you for your trouble, senior brother. Xiao Hua was somewhat ashamed.
Don't say this.
As long as you can build your foundation, it's enough for my myriad Thunder Valley. Xiangyang regretted saying this. Yes, junior brother knows. Xiao Hua smiled as if he didn't take it to heart. The Wang Yunxiao from a few years ago was already not worth mentioning in Xiao Hua's eyes. Now that his cultivation had advanced rapidly, even if Wang Yunxiao had already built his foundation, would Xiao Hua still care about him? Building his foundation was just an empty title. Alas, Xiangyang didn't understand. He thought that Xiao Hua was the same as him in the past, disheartened and gloomy. Therefore, he stopped talking about cultivation and picked up some other things to talk about. However, Xiangyang wasn't good at talking. After a few sentences, they talked about cultivation again. In the end, Xiangyang simply stopped talking. The two of them hurried on their way in silence. Zhen Qing was still in the pavilion at the back of the mountain. She scanned with her divine sense and knew that Xiaohua had come, so she stopped playing the flute. After the disciple who led Xiaohua here left, she said with a smile, "A few days ago, I suddenly remembered something. It was precisely to return the favor at the Feather Immortal Assembly that I sent you a messaging talisman." Unexpectedly, the messaging talisman didn't leave. Presumably, you couldn't receive messages in the Deafening Thunder Palace, so you sent a message to your master. Return a favor? Xiao Hua's eyes turned, and he was secretly delighted. He bowed and said, "Disciple has failed to build his foundation. What's there to be afraid of if my cultivation is delayed for a day or half a day? It's just that disciple didn't come in time. I've made Grandmaster wait for a long time." Chapter 1677. After Xiangyang and Xiao Hua greeted Zhenqing said that he wanted to return Xiao Hua's favor. Xiao Hua couldn't help but feel happy. How could a Golden Core Stage Senior's return gift be lacking? Xiao Hua said modestly, "Disciple came late. Sorry for making Grandmaster wait for so long. Disciple didn't mean to do that. How could I dare to make Grandmaster owe me a favor?" Zhenqing didn't put on the airs of a Grandmaster. He waved his sleeve and said with a smile, "What I owe you is what I owe you. No matter what you say, I will return it. I don't dare to refuse a favor from an elder. Thank you for your kindness, Grandmaster." Xiao Hua stopped while he was ahead. Zhenqing glanced at Xiangyang and transmitted her voice to Xiao Hua. "Do you remember that during the Feather Immortal Gathering, when you obtained the sword embryo that was not controlled by divine sense, I said that I had seen something similar?" Xiao Hua's heart warmed, and he also said, "Grandmaster, disciple naturally remembers. I didn't expect Grandmaster to still remember after so many years." "Hee, you don't know how it feels to owe a favor," Zhenqing said with a smile. "I wanted to give you some benefits after you reached the foundation establishment stage. However, you didn't reach the foundation establishment stage. In these 5 or 6 years, there was no movement. However, fortunately, I found the origin of that thing in these 5 or 6 years." Zhenqing clapped his hand and took out a jade slip and handed it over. "Speaking of this thing, it has some history. My master, Daoist Lu Prung, came across it by chance when he was training in the Xiaoyu continent. At that time, I was still young and only listened to it casually. If it wasn't for this strange sword embryo from the Taiching sect, how could I remember it? Previously, I thought it was something related to our Imperial Thunder sect. After searching for a long time, I found it." Seeing Xiao Hua take the jade slip, Zhenqing said, "However, this is something that happened 200 years ago. I can't guarantee that the thing is still there."
Ah?
200 years. Xiao Hua was a little shocked. Then he felt even more grateful. Zhenqing was a Golden Core Realm senior. She actually went through so much trouble just because of what she said earlier. She even brought up the matter from 200 years ago. This favor was really too big. "Thank you, Grandmaster." Disciple was really scared. Xiao Hua bowed again. "These are all illusory things. There's no need to thank me so early." Zhenqing didn't mind at all. He flicked his sleeves and didn't let Xiao Hua thank him. "The other things in the jade slip are also some of this old man's experiences. If you have the chance, you can take a look at them carefully." "Really?" When Xiao Hua heard this, he became even happier. He was already thinking about it in his heart. If it was just a piece of news, Zhenqing wouldn't make such a big fuss. She only needed to send a message. Thus, he released his divine sense and immersed it into the jade slip. It was fine if he didn't read it, but after reading it, his face became even more interesting. However, before Xiao Hua could say anything, Zhenqing transmitted her voice to him. "You don't have to tell anyone about this. Just take a look for yourself." "Yes, disciple understands." Xiao Hua carefully replied and put away the jade slip.
Go.
"Cultivate carefully. This old man thinks highly of you." Zhenqing looked at Xiangyang and said, "Cultivation is important. However, it also depended on the immortal fate. If there wasn't any immortal fate and you insisted on forcing it, you might not be able to obtain it at all. Your eldest martial brother is a good example. Although he used 50 years to reach the Foundation Establishment realm, he still reached the Foundation Establishment realm. Now, he has also reached the middle stage of the Foundation Establishment realm. Compared to those who haven't reached the Foundation Establishment realm, and those who are stuck at the early stage of the Foundation Establishment realm, isn't he 100 times stronger? Yes, disciple understands, Xiao Hua said with a smile. Cultivation is about cultivating the heart. Realms are just the surface. If your heart isn't strong enough, even if you have a realm, it will be difficult for you to progress further. Zhen Qing seemed to want to continue, but after saying a few words, he smiled and said, "These are too profound. They are just some of my experiences. I'm afraid you won't be able to comprehend them at the late stage of the qi refining realm. You're still young, so you should cultivate slowly. Don't be impatient." "Thank you, Grandmaster, for your guidance. Go." Zhen Qing waved his sleeve and flew into the air, gradually disappearing into the fog. Then, the melodious sound of the flute sounded again. The sound of the flute revealed a kind of relaxed and free feeling. Xiangyang accompanied Xiao Hua out of the Zhen Lei Palace. From the beginning to the end, he didn't say a word. He only looked at the jade slip given by Zhen Qing and didn't ask about it at all. After the two of them left the Zhen Lei Palace and flew for a while, Xiangyang spoke for the first time. "Little martial brother, are you going back to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library? Or are you following me back to the Myriad Thunder Valley to see Master?" Xiao Hua pondered for a moment and shook his head. "I've already read most of the books in the Heavenly Thunder Palace. There's no need for me to go back this time. As for Master, do you think he'll be willing to see me? Master is also concerned about you." After saying this, Xiangyang couldn't say anything else. On the way to the Zhen Lei Palace, he had already said everything he needed to say. He knew Xiao Hua's temper better than anyone else. What he could endure, others might not be able to. Especially this little martial brother of a rogue cultivator background. He usually looked very easygoing, but his bones were full of pride. When faced with Xiao Hua, who kept calling him little brat, he definitely wouldn't be able to calm down. Rather than that, it was better to not see him. "I know," Xiao Hua said calmly. "I'm going to prepare to go out and travel." While Xiao Hua was speaking, a crimson-red thunder sound transmitting talisman flew over and landed in front of Xiao Hua. "Hee, I'm afraid it's Xue Xue from the Sun Lei Palace." Xiangyang hurriedly changed the topic. "Master's wife mentioned her a few times. Ever since you came back from the Tai Ching sect, she hasn't come to the Myriad Thunder Valley for more than 5 years. When is she free? Let her come over." "Yes, I know." Xiao Hua's face was slightly red. As he answered, he opened the sound-transmitting talisman. When he scanned it with his divine sense, a hesitant expression appeared on his face. "What's wrong? Something happened again?" Xiangyang saw this and asked in a low voice. "Oh, it's nothing, eldest martial brother." Xiao Hua took out the sound-transmitting talisman and said a few words. Then he raised his hand and sent the sound-transmitting talisman out with a smile. "It's a martial sister who went to the Feather Immortal Gathering. She wants to go with me to the Foundation Establishment realm. I've already agreed to this matter." Hearing this, Xiangyang's face lit up. He clapped his hands and said with a smile, "Great. I'm worried that you'll be in danger if you travel alone. With our martial brother." "It's a martial sister?" "Yes, it's Xue Xue's martial sister, Sun Shu. She invited me at the Feather Immortal Gathering," Xiao Hua explained. "Oh, so it's Sun Shu." Xiangyang's face revealed an understanding expression. He nodded deeply and said, "Yes, Sun Shu's cultivation and appearance are comparable to Xue Xue's. You should go." "Eldest martial brother?" Xiao Hua was slightly stunned. He immediately understood the meaning of these words. But how could he explain such ambiguous words? "Hee, I know." Xiangyang waved his hand. "You go back and prepare. I'll go back and tell Master's wife about this matter, so that she won't worry." "Master's wife?" Xiao Hua was even more stunned. His face was slightly embarrassed. Xiangyang didn't say much. He turned around and flew away using the hibernating thunder escape. Before he left, he said, "Little Marshall brother, before you left, you said that you wanted to send a sound-transmitting talisman to Master. If you've reached the Foundation Establishment Realm, you'll return earlier." Foundation Establishment Realm. Hee. I'm afraid it's not possible within a few years, Xiao Hua thought. Then he smiled and agreed. He also used the Awakening Thunder Escape and flew back to the Eastern Ridge Her Garden. Awakening Thunder Escape.
No.
No way? Xiangyang was secretly happy for his little Marshall brother. He naturally turned around and glanced. He saw Xiao Hua's figure disappearing in the distance. Seeing Xiao Hua's thunder escape, Xiangyang, who was using the hibernating thunder escape, was so shocked that he almost fell from the sky. Even though he wasn't too clear on what cultivation level the awakening lightning escape was, he knew that his own cultivation level at the middle stage of Foundation Establishment had only just recently succeeded in cultivating the hibernating lightning escape. The awakening lightning escape, as far as he was concerned, it was impossible for him to successfully cultivate it in this lifetime. As for Xiao Hua, how could an aura condensation disciple possibly know it? I must have seen wrongly. Xiangyang, who had always been honest, couldn't help but doubt his own eyes. He rubbed his eyes and sighed in his heart. He flew up again, but this time, his speed was much slower. Xiao Hua didn't think that his awakening thunder escape would cause such a blow to Xiangyang. He only felt warm in his heart. While flying, he immersed his divine sense into the jade slip that Zhen Qing gave him. Naturally, in the jade slip, Zhen Qing's master, Taoist Master Lu Prung, only recorded a small part of another material. The rest was what Zhen Qing really left for Xiao Hua. This part of the jade slip was divided into two parts. The first part was the most important, accounting for 80%. It was all about the refining and use of magic treasures. Presumably, Zhen Qing saw that the cloud-suppressing seal's incantation was incomplete, so she took the trouble to find a suitable incantation for Xiao Hua. As for the other 20%, although there weren't many records, it was the most precious. It was actually Zhen Qing's understanding of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment Realm. This understanding wasn't much. For Zhen Qing, it was just a superficial understanding. But for Xiao Hua, it was simply a mountain of gold. This was the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment Realm, not the understanding of breaking through to the Qi Refinement Realm. For Zhen Qing, the understanding of breaking through to the Qi Refinement Realm was too far away. Perhaps she couldn't remember it clearly. Moreover, Xiao Hua's master was helpless. Zhen Qing taking out the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment Realm was too incongruous. Therefore, in order to counter Xiao Hua's failure to break through to the Foundation Establishment Realm, Zhen Qing could only take out the understanding of breaking through to the Foundation Establishment Realm. This was also the reason why Xiao Hua was wild with joy when he saw the contents of the jade slip. At the same time, it was also the reason why Zhen Qing transmitted a message to Xiao Hua and didn't let him spread it outside. Xiao Hua gave up on many things and only immersed his divine sense into the jade slip. He pondered over Zhen Qing's understanding word by word. The more he pondered over it, the more he felt that every word was like a gem. Every word was like the bottom of his heart. Every word scratched the itch of his cultivation. An indescribable feeling spontaneously arose in his heart. Just as Xiao Hua was scratching his head and cheering in his heart, a strong feeling of threat arose from the bottom of his heart, and it forcefully extinguished the lively feeling in his heart. Chapter 1678. Xiao Hua immediately stopped his escape technique and floated in midair. His gaze flickered as he looked around the wilderness again and again. "Come out!" Xiao Hua shouted angrily, but his divine sense had locked onto a certain place. Clap, clap. The sound of palms clapping came from that place, and then a cultivator in a dark Taoist robe flew out from his hiding place. Xiao Hua's pupils constricted when he saw that this cultivator was in the early stage of foundation establishment and didn't hide his appearance. At this time, he already recognized that this cultivator was the foundation establishment cultivator who coveted him in the Eastern Mountain Range several years ago. As expected, you defeated Xiao Hua, the champion of the Feather Immortal Assembly. You truly deserve your reputation. The inexplicable cultivator clapped and laughed. I was confident that my concealment technique was cultivated to a very high level, but you actually still saw through it. Xiao Hua looked at him coldly and didn't answer. He was calculating this guy's origin in his mind.
What?
You actually forgot about etiquette after seeing a foundation establishment senior? A trace of ridicule flashed through the cultivator's eyes. However, this ridicule also revealed a trace of coldness. How could Xiao Hua salute? He sneered and said, "Since you're a senior, then you should have the integrity of a senior. What's the reason for hiding to the side and intercepting this junior?" "I intercepted you?" The cultivator laughed and pointed his hand. Xiao Hua immediately dodged, afraid that the cultivator would use some kind of technique. If I wanted to make things difficult for you, would I need to waste so much effort?" The cultivator didn't use any kind of technique, and it really seemed to be just a hand gesture. But at this time, Xiao Hua's expression suddenly changed. He suddenly raised his head and slightly swept his gaze over the top of his head. His entire body suddenly retreated, and his speed seemed to not be inferior to the speed of flying just now.
Ha!
The expression of the cultivator in dark clothes also changed greatly. He received a message from someone and knew that Xiao Hua might return to the Eastern Mountain Range's medicinal garden, so he set up a formation here in advance. Unfortunately, he was discovered by Xiao Hua one step ahead and didn't fall into the formation. He said so much to stall for time, so that his other companion could set up another formation. But he didn't expect that Xiao Hua's divine sense would actually be so powerful, discovering the movements of another person. Moreover, Xiao Hua's speed was so fast that the dark-clothed cultivator couldn't help but be vigilant. He slapped his forehead and released the pressure of a foundation establishment cultivator. A surge of power immediately pressed down on the distant Xiao Hua. Following the release of this cultivator's pressure, the other fat cultivator in the air where Xiao Hua was standing also revealed an expression of disbelief. He looked at the dark-robed cultivator in surprise and slapped his hand, releasing the same pressure that smashed down like a mountain. In the blink of an eye, Xiao Hua had used the lightning escape technique to fly several tens of feet away. Just as he was about to be caught up by the two foundation establishment cultivators, the pressure from the top of his head firmly suppressed Xiao Hua. His entire body couldn't even move. 17th brother. Did this guy just use the awakening lightning escape? The fat cultivator saw that Xiao Hua was under his control and asked curiously. The 17th brother was Zhen Hao of the Thunderclap Palace's Swallow Thunder Ridge, and the fat cultivator was Zhen Miao, ranked 15th in Swallow Thunder Ridge. Good, 15th brother, it seems to be the case. Zhen Hao was also somewhat perplexed. But that's not very likely, right? This guy is a genius. Zhen Miao coldly snorted. He's only in the 12th layer of qi refining, yet he can already use the lightning escape technique. Even in the entire Imperial Thunder sect, such a person is rare. Unfortunately, he offended my Swallow Thunder Ridge. While speaking, Zhen Miao waved his hand, and a flying sword talisman appeared in his hand. He then waved it, and the flying sword shot like lightning toward Xiao Hua, who couldn't move in the slightest under the pressure of the two cultivators. That's all there is to it. Zhen Hao laughed. 4th senior brother, you speak so highly of this little thief, but in the end, he's only an aura refining junior. Today, you and I, two foundation establishment cultivators, are attacking at the same time. It's like the strong bullying the weak. If it weren't for the fact that we were afraid of being leaked, we would have let you come alone. Zhen Miao's eyes shone with a cold light. His fat face squeezed his eyes into the size of mung beans as he looked at the flying sword talisman that was about to pierce Xiao Hua's chest. But just as the two of them decided to have a card up their sleeve, a sudden change occurred. Xiao Hua, who was firmly suppressed by the pressure of the two foundation establishment cultivators, didn't struggle with all his might like they had imagined. Instead, after his initial futile struggle, his face became gloomy and he stared fixedly at the two cultivators, as if he was thinking about something. When the flying sword talisman was about to pierce his chest, a cold light flashed through Xiao Hua's eyes. The true qi in his body rapidly circulated, and a layer of faint golden brilliance overflowed from his body. Immediately, Xiao Hua's body expanded like a balloon. His two big hands were more than twice as big as before. His right hand reached forward, and the flying sword talisman was caught by his big hand like a swimming fish. With a clang, the flying sword talisman pierced Xiao Hua's faint golden hand, and several sparks burst out. Xiao Hua didn't seem to be in any pain. Then, he clenched his hand, and after a burst of metallic sound, a tattered talisman paper floated down from his hand. Zhen Miao and Zhen Miao were stunned. They urged their pressure again, wanting to suppress Xiao Hua. But at this time, although Xiao Hua was afraid of pressure, he was far from being completely suppressed like before. He still had the strength to move. How is this possible? Zhen Miao shook his head in disbelief. He had never seen an aura-refining cultivator who wasn't afraid of pressure. This was the difference in realm, the natural restraint of high-grade cultivators over low-grade cultivators. Go! Zhen Miao didn't hesitate and flew away from Zhen Miao's side. He stopped on the other side of Xiao Hua, and with a wave of his hand, a wheel-shaped magic tool appeared in the air. This was Zhen Miao's magic tool, the Four Phases Wheel. The Four Phases Wheel had 4 protrusions. As Zhen Miao released them, each protrusion emitted a peculiar brilliance. As it rotated, it smashed towards Xiao Hua's faint golden body that was already 6 meters tall. Oh, no, this seems to be a kind of divine ability. It's not the expansion of Xiao Hua's body. Seeing Zhen Miao throw out the magic tool, Zhen Miao's heart felt a little more at ease. Only after scanning with his divine sense did he realize that Xiao Hua's faint golden body was a Dharma idol, not a real body. Moreover, most of the Dharma idol was blurry, with only a faint golden outline. Only the 2 arms and 2 legs could be seen clearly. Go! Xiao Hua, who was urging the great strength Vajra Dharma idol, saw the light of the 4 phases while stirring the spiritual qi of heaven and earth, and a small vortex formed in the air. He knew that this magic tool was powerful. Without hesitation, the great strength Vajra Dharma idol turned slightly, clenched his left hand into a fist, and met the attack head-on. Bang! With a loud sound, the 4 phases wheel was knocked back, and a piece of Xiao Hua's Dharma idol's fist was also cut off. Oh no! Not only was Xiao Hua slightly surprised, but Zhen Miao also secretly cursed in his heart. He never thought that his magic tool would be knocked back by Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's heart ached even more for the great strength Vajra Dharma idol that he had painstakingly condensed. Then, Xiao Hua didn't dare to be negligent. He slapped his forehead, and the cloud-suppressing seal appeared in the air. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal appeared, it immediately showed the power of a magic tool. A buzzing sound immediately filled the air, and along with the noise, the cloud-suppressing seal rapidly grew from a size of 3 inches to a size of 3 meters. All the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the surroundings was attracted to it, and a lot of spiritual qi even formed a ribbon around the cloud-suppressing seal. What a magic tool! Zhen Miao and Zhen Miao praised in their hearts when they saw this. Haha, since I am here, I naturally have a way to deal with you. It's just a magic tool. Zhen Miao laughed, patted his storage bag, and took out a cloud-like magic tool. He casually threw it into the air. Then, Zhen Miao clenched his right hand into a fist and punched himself in the chest. Poof! A mouthful of blood rushed out and hit the magic tool. The cloud was instantly dyed red, but then the blood entered the magic tool, and it returned to its original white color. Let me show you the 100-layer cloud mountain of my Thunder Swallow Ridge. Zhen Miao shouted loudly, and even called out the name of Thunder Swallow Ridge. He pointed his finger, and a spell was sent into the 100-layer cloud mountain. A huge suction force was generated from the 100-layer cloud mountain, and in an instant, more than half of Zhen Miao's spiritual qi was sucked away. The 100-layer cloud mountain, which had absorbed the spiritual qi, suddenly expanded to a size of several hundred meters. The pure white brilliance was like a real cloud, and it covered the three of them. Thunder Swallow Ridge. Xiao Hua was slightly shocked. He even called out the name of the 100-layer cloud mountain. Today, he must be prepared to die. So, while sneering, he pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal whizzed toward Zhen Miao. Humph. At this time, the three of them were under the 100-layer cloud mountain. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal coming down, Zhen Miao sneered and pointed his finger. A white cloud appeared above Zhen Miao's head, blocking the falling cloud-suppressing seal. Poof! The cloud-suppressing seal smashed into the white cloud, and it was as if it fell into cotton. Ha ha ha. Before Xiao Hua could react, Zhen Miao was the first to laugh. His gaze swept over Zhen Miao, and that Zhen Miao's face also showed a relaxed expression. He pointed his finger at the four-phase wheel, and that magic tool spun rapidly. It also made a buzzing sound, and the four colors of brilliance mixed together, stirring up the spiritual energy of heaven and earth, and flew toward Xiao Hua. Xiao Hua's face was calm as he stood in the air, and he didn't appear to be surprised. He only looked at the two foundation establishment cultivators on his left and right, and thought to himself. He was now an aura-refining cultivator, and his body didn't have any spiritual pressure. The spiritual pressure of two foundation establishment cultivators was his nemesis. If he didn't have the Vajra Dharma body, he really wouldn't be able to handle it. Now, he could only release his Dharma body to resist the spiritual pressure. Fortunately, the Vajra Dharma body was a Buddhist divine ability, and he didn't need to use too much spiritual qi. Damn it! This young master's cultivation is now at the 15th layer of aura refining, and I've also cultivated the prairie fire cultivation technique to the middle stage of foundation establishment. Why would I be afraid of you? Contempt grew in Xiao Hua's heart, and he coldly snorted. He urged the spiritual qi in his body and pointed his finger at the cloud-suppressing seal. The cloud-suppressing seal produced a powerful suction force, and at the same time it sucked in Xiao Hua's spiritual qi, it also swept away all the spiritual energy of heaven and earth in the surrounding Tenjiang. Rise! Zhen Miao was slightly startled, and he hurriedly chanted an incantation to urge the 100-layer cloud mountain, and the clouds blocking the cloud-suppressing seal became even thicker. Chapter 1679. Contrary to Zhen Ming's expectations, the cloud-suppressing seal not only didn't expand as he expected, but instead seemed to shrink at an extremely fast speed. In the blink of an eye, it shrank to the size of a foot. Then, as Xiao Hua cast a spell, the cloud-suppressing seal actually broke free from the clouds and whistled towards the four symbols wheel. Humph, an aura-refining disciple, it's already good that you can drive a magic weapon, but you actually dare to collide directly with I. You simply don't know how to write the word death. Zhen Hao saw Xiao Hua's magic weapon rapidly shrinking and thought that Xiao Hua's magic power was insufficient to maintain the magic weapon, so he shrank it to the size of a foot, wanting to fight to the death with him. While sneering, he sent his magic power into the four symbols wheel to drive the magic weapon, wanting to smash the cloud-suppressing seal away. Pung! A deafening sound rang out. The 1-foot-long suppressing cloud seal smashed onto the 3-foot-long four phases wheel. The four colors of brilliance on the four phases wheel suddenly flourished, like sharp swords piercing through the horizon, separately rushing towards the suppressing cloud seal. The suppressing cloud seal's bronze brilliance faintly flowed, forcibly suppressing these brilliances, compressing them inch by inch. By the time the sound rang out, the suppressing cloud seal had already completely suppressed the brilliance of the four phases wheel within the artifact. Immediately, while the sound was still lingering in the ears of the three people, the brilliance of the four symbols wheel suddenly converged, revealing its original body. It was actually smashed by the cloud-suppressing seal that was much smaller than it. Pooh! As the four symbols wheel was smashed, Zhenhao, who was not far away, spat out a mouthful of blood, his face pale gold. Ah! Zhenming, who was on the other side of Xiaohua, was greatly alarmed. He waved his hand, a fiery red brilliance flashed, and a 1-foot-long spear-like magic weapon flew out of his hand, like a meteor flying towards Xiaohua's back. Xiaohua had already released his Buddhist sense. How could he not pay attention to it? He only saw his hand point, and the cloud-suppressing seal buzzed, slightly raised, and smashed toward Zhenhao. At the same time, Xiaohua's mighty Vajra slightly leaned to the side, his left fist clenched at the same time, smashing towards the spear-like magic weapon. Good. Is this still an aura-refining cultivator? Zhenming almost didn't dare to believe his own eyes. Xiaohua was really too ferocious. He was facing 2 foundation establishment cultivators by himself, and at this moment, he didn't seem to be at a disadvantage. Furthermore, Xiaohua had actually directly used a magic treasure and an unknown Dharma body to forcefully resist a foundation establishment magic artifact. Zhenhao, who was not far away, did not have the time to be as shocked as Zhenming. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal was lifted, he felt an unparalleled deterrent force from the magic treasure. This deterrent force was more powerful than the pressure of a gold core stage cultivator. It directly pressed into the depths of his soul, making him feel that he could not resist, could not avoid, and could not break free. Zhenhao didn't even try to resist, but he was already filled with despair. This made his heart tremble. Furthermore, his magical item had been knocked away by the cloud-suppressing seal, so it was temporarily disconnected from his mind. He couldn't control it, so he could only make a final struggle. He waved his hand, took out a dozen yellow talismans, and threw them at the cloud-suppressing seal. Using a yellow talisman against a magic treasure was the biggest joke in the world. As soon as those yellow talismans revealed their power, they were immediately turned into talisman paper under the might of the cloud-suppressing seal. One after another, they fluttered down, just like the endless disdain in Xiaohua's eyes. Just as the traces of blood flowing out of the bronze cloud-suppressing seal were about to smash into Zhenhao's body, a snow-white light burst out from Zhenhao's body. That snow-white light was extremely dazzling. It actually made Xiaohua's eyes twitch, and he couldn't help but squint. Under the suppression of the cloud-suppressing seal, a layer of white armor appeared on Zhenhao's body. The armor was obviously damaged and could only cover Zhenhao's back. Even so, the talismans flowing on the armor emitted a white light, protecting Zhenhao's entire body. The light blocked the cloud-suppressing seal's front, firmly blocking the bronze light of the cloud-suppressing seal. No matter how the cloud-suppressing seal rolled, it could not fall down. A protective magic artifact. Xiaohua cried out involuntarily.
He should have thought about it.
Since Zhenming could take out a magic artifact to contend with his cloud-suppressing seal, how could Zhenhao not have won? After all, Thunder Mountain Ridge was the place where Thunderquake Palace refined artifacts. Seeing that his MO cloud armor had successfully blocked the cloud-suppressing seal in midair, Zhenhao couldn't help but let out a long breath. However, his heart didn't seem to relax, because the shock from the cloud-suppressing seal didn't lessen in the slightest because of the MO cloud armor's appearance. At the same time, Zhenming's magic artifact flew behind Xiaohua. Xiaohua cried out in alarm and urged his avatar's fist to smash the spear-shaped magic artifact with a bang. An unparalleled force was generated, and Zhenming's heart was also shaken. His magic artifact was also sent flying by Xiaohua's avatar. Too powerful. Zhenming controlled the magic artifact with great difficulty. When he controlled the magic artifact to turn around again, he actually wanted to retreat. But just as Zhenming thought of retreating, Xiaohua made another move that puzzled him. Xiaohua's figure suddenly moved. It really was the awakening thunder escape that he suspected. A shadow that even divine sense couldn't capture flashed by, and Xiaohua actually flew in front of Zhenhao. Seeing Xiao Hua's sinister smile approaching, Zhan Hao retreated in panic, as if he had encountered a rogue virgin. But how could Xiao Hua allow him to retreat? He thickened his face and moved his mouth closer. As Xiao Hua's figure approached, his avatar also moved. The pale golden left hand opened and grabbed the tumbling cloud-suppressing seal in midair. Then, with a flip of his hand, he actually smashed the cloud-suppressing seal towards Zhenmeng. As soon as the cloud-suppressing seal flew away, the shock that shocked Zhen Hao disappeared. While Zhen Hao was puzzled, he didn't hesitate and urged his flying technique to escape from Xiao Hua's eyes. Still want to run? Xiao Hua's face showed an inexplicable smile. As he spoke, he spat out a red and green sword light, which pierced towards Zhen Hao's face faster than lightning. Flying sword talisman? Seeing the sword light, Zhen Hao's heart lightened for no reason. He knew that this Mo cloud armor was a magic artifact. How could a flying sword talisman pierce through it? However, when the sword light appeared, a kind of shock similar to the cloud-suppressing seal appeared from the depths of his heart. Not good. Before Zhen Hao could think of anything else, the green and red sword light pierced the Mo cloud armor. Break! Xiao Hua shouted softly. The white light of the Mo cloud armor was indeed pierced like a bubble by the sword light. The green and red sword light instantly pierced Zhen Hao's face. Too fast. Too fast. This was Zhen Hao's last bit of emotion. He almost only had the chance to think before his vision turned black. He didn't have any time to resist, even if he took out some useless yellow talismans or other magic artifacts. At the same time that Zhen Hao died, the cloud-suppressing seal thrown by Xiao Hua's mighty Vajra avatar also arrived in front of Zhenmeng. At this time, Zhenmeng had just controlled his magic artifact. Seeing the cloud-suppressing seal flying towards him, he also had the same shock as Zhen Hao. Without hesitation, he waved his hand and a layer of pure white clouds appeared in front of him. The 100-layer cloud mountain blocked the karmic power of the cloud-suppressing seal. Strange. This is... Zhenmeng and Zhen Hao didn't understand why this shock came from their souls. They could only use the 100-layer cloud mountain's power to protect themselves. I'm afraid it's time to retreat. Zhenmeng sighed in his heart. He raised his eyes to look at Zhen Hao. As a result, a shocking scene appeared. Because Xiao Hua was tall and thin, blocking Zhen Hao, Zhenmeng couldn't clearly see what happened over there. However, Zhen Hao's floating corpse and Xiao Hua's sudden turn told him that an early-stage Foundation establishment cultivator from Swallow Thunder Ridge had been killed by a late-stage qi refining disciple from Myriad Thunder Valley. Zhenmeng was slightly stunned. He didn't have time to think anymore. He didn't have time to control his magic artifact. He urged his body to use the flight technique to escape. But just as he was about to run, the cloud-suppressing seal had already smashed in front of him. The cloud-suppressing seal was blocked by the 100-layer cloud mountain before. This time, Zhenmeng didn't dare to be careless. When he turned around, he still pointed his finger. Magic power flowed everywhere, and another layer of white clouds appeared in front of him to block. Puff, puff, puff. 3 or 4 muffled sounds rang out. The cloud-suppressing seal that was blocked just now was now like a hot knife through butter. In an instant, it pierced through many clouds and fiercely appeared on Zhenmeng's back. This is bad. Zhenmeng's face was ashen. His heart was like dead ashes. Even his magic treasure, the 100-layer cloud mountain, was broken. How could his body's defense resist? Sure enough, before the cloud-suppressing seal could reach him, a burst of brilliance flashed on Zhenmeng's body. All of his defenses were crushed. Puff! The cloud-suppressing seal lightly hit Zhenmeng's back. The sound was extremely soft, and the force wasn't strong either. It was only a little bit stronger than a lover's caress. But it was this kind of force that actually shattered Zhenmeng's soul. Zhenmeng's body was like a fluttering autumn leaf, helplessly floating down. Phew. Seeing that Zhenmeng was also struck down by the cloud-suppressing seal, Xiao Hua let out a long sigh. His face suddenly turned dark red. Without thinking, he hurriedly withdrew the mighty Vajra Dharma into his body. He pointed his finger, and the cloud-suppressing seal flew above his head to protect him. Then, he sat down cross-legged and activated the prairie fire mental cultivation method. The true energy in his meridians began to flow along them. After the time it took to eat a meal, Xiao Hua's complexion slightly improved. But Xiao Hua didn't dare to delay any longer. He released his Buddhist awareness. Seeing that there were no more movements around him, he waved his hand and put away the cloud-suppressing seal. Then, he landed on the ground and collected Zhenmeng and Zhenhao's storage pouches and magic treasures. He used the true samadhi fire to destroy their corpses. Then, he flew into the air and prepared to fly towards the eastern ridge. But after flying for a few hundred feet, Xiao Hua stopped again. He lowered his head and looked for a long time. Then, he landed on the small mountain below and pondered for a while. After a few hand seals, a few formation flags, and a formation plate appeared at the mountain stream. To deal with a chi-refining disciple like me, you still need to set up a formation? You really don't have enough shame. Xiao Hua sneered. With a wave of his hand, many things were stored into the space. Then, he flew into the air. At the same time, outside of a secret hall within the Thunderclap Palace, a bright light suddenly flashed at the entrance of a hall. A gold core stage cultivator frowned as he revealed himself. He looked at the hall in front of him and whispered, "Which disciple is this? There are actually people who have lost their lives outside." Chapter 1680. Xiao Hua flew back to the Eastern Ridge Herb Garden, but he didn't dare to be distracted. Not only did he release his divine sense, but he also released his Buddhist sense from time to time, for fear of encountering another hidden formation. Although the life and death battle just now seemed very short, it was incomparably dangerous. Even now, Xiao Hua's heart was still thumping wildly. Those were 2 early Foundation establishment seniors. He really didn't expect that he would be able to kill them without any mishap. While his heart was beating fast, Xiao Hua also felt an inexplicable sense of ecstasy. He had just reached the 15th layer of Qi refining. If he really reached the 18th layer of Qi refining and then entered Foundation establishment, would he be able to kill late Foundation establishment cultivators? Naturally, Xiao Hua couldn't help but think with lingering fear. The pressure of a Foundation establishment cultivator is too strong. Qi refining disciples are definitely not their match, and late Foundation establishment cultivators are even more so. Even if I have the great strength Vajra Dharma body and can resist the pressure, I'm afraid it won't work against late Foundation establishment cultivators. Moreover, in the fight just now, my magic power was also exhausted. It seems the quality of my true Qi is still inferior to true essence. Even if I reach the 18th layer of Qi refining, it still can't compare to the true essence of a late Foundation establishment cultivator. Of course, I don't know what true essence is like after Foundation establishment. Furthermore, the reason why I was able to kill those 2 Foundation establishment cultivators from Swallow Thunder Ridge was mainly because of the cloud-suppressing seal and the Dream Slayer. After 5 years of tempering, the cloud-suppressing seal is a lot more powerful than before, especially after condensing. Its power is even greater, catching them off guard. Hee. The Dream Executor is even more out of this young master's expectations. The immeasurable karmic fire and Tai green Qi at the same time really are incomparably sharp. After flying for more than 2 hours, Xiao Hua arrived at the Eastern Ridge. After checking that there were no flaws in the formation, he opened it and went in. Then, he checked the herb garden again, activated the green leaf fire formation, and returned to his immortal's cave with peace of mind. Zhenmeng and Zhenhao had a lot of things in their storage bags. Not only were there spirit dawn and spirit stones, there were also a lot of refining materials. Xiao Hua didn't hesitate to put all of them into his space. Then he picked up a few jade slips and checked them one by one. After Xiao Hua finished reading through these jade slips, a faint smile appeared on the corners of his mouth. With a shake of his hand, he shot out a few strands of Samadhi True Flame, burning the 2 storage pouches, as well as the tokens and other items that he did not take out from the storage pouches. He said with a smile, "2 ruffians from Swallow Thunder Ridge actually had the intention to kill me. I'm afraid you guys wouldn't have thought of it, right? You guys just gave me the refining method for nothing. I was just thinking about how to refine the sword embryo, and now you're giving me the manual. I really don't know how to thank all of you." When he thought up to here, Xiao Hua's heart jolted, and his Buddhist consciousness swept through the heart of the Buddha's relic. Sure enough, the boundless karmic fire within it was slightly exuberant, and it was precisely the karmic fire from killing the 2 of them. Since this immeasurable hellfire is my karma, I'm afraid it has other uses other than tempering spiritual swords. I've read so many ancient books in the library, but why haven't I seen any records of the Buddhist sect? There's such a karmic fire within the Buddha's relic. If I don't take precautions, maybe I'll be burned by it. Thinking about Zhen Hao and Jin Xing's helpless appearance under the 2 magic treasures, Xiao Huan knew how powerful the immeasurable hellfire was. Naturally, he had to make plans for himself first. I forgot that Zhen Xie and Qin Mingwei both went to the Buddhist sect in advance, and I haven't checked their jade slips. Could it be? However, Qin Mingwei's storage pouch was burned, and not a single jade slip was left behind. I'm afraid it won't be easy. Thinking up to here, Xiaohua took out the jade slips he obtained from Zhen Xie. After looking through these jade slips, Xiaohua's eyes revealed a trace of joy. It turned out that not only did Qin Mingwei find the contents of the Buddhist sect's ruins, Zhen Xie had also obtained them, and the records were very detailed. There were several layers of the ruins, and what kind of restrictions there were in each layer. If it weren't for the fact that the location of the Buddhist sect's ruins was not recorded in this jade slip, Xiao Hua would have been able to enter with this jade slip. This is strange. Since Zhen Xie also had this thing, how could he fall into Qin Mingwei's trap? Xiao Hua scratched his head and said inwardly, "I'm afraid he only found it later." Xiao Hua's thought was wrong. This jade slip originally belonged to Qin Mingwei, but the 2 of them obtained the exquisite derivation pagoda in the Buddhist sect's ruins. Since the exquisite derivation pagoda was handed over to Qin Mingwei for safekeeping, this jade slip naturally fell into Zhen Xie's hands. As for why the Buddhist sect's ruins were not recorded, Zhen Xie and Qin Mingwei had already died, so Xiao Hua didn't have a place to ask. Forget it. With this thing, this young master actually has some confidence in the Buddhist sect's ruins. If Senior Hanju really wants me to go there, my courage will also increase by a bit. Xiao Hua smiled as he put away the jade slip, preparing to properly memorize it if he had the opportunity in the future. At this time, it was still early before the appointed time, so Xiao Hua didn't go to the Heavenly Thunder Palace's library. On one hand, he continued to refine the fire essence flame crystal, but on the other hand, he took out the qi refining jade slips from the space. From easy to difficult, he looked through them bit by bit. Refining tools was similar to refining pills, but different materials were condensed together using true fire. Of course, compared to refining pills, refining tools was different. Refining pills used true fire to refine pills was a slow fire, condensing the fine into the long, tempering out the impurities in the medicinal herbs. Then, with pill techniques, using the principles of monarch and minister, yin and yang, the different medicinal liquids were condensed into pills. This process was very mysterious, somewhat similar to the qi refining foundation establishment and core formation of cultivators. Therefore, it was also the most difficult type of refining. Refining tools, on the other hand, used martial fire to refine. It paid particular attention to fierceness and roughness, refining out the impurities in the qi refining materials, improving the quality of the materials. Then, just like refining pills, all kinds of materials were condensed together to condense magic tools. Among them, the materials, the method of condensing, and the embedded array were the key to the success of the magic tool. At the same time, it was also the foundation of the difference in quality. The same materials in the hands of different refiners could be divided into several grades and could even be divided into magic tools and magic treasures. Of course, Xiao Hua wasn't preparing to refine tools. What he was thinking was only how to repair damaged magic treasures and how to successfully refine the sword embryo. Xiao Hua originally thought that Sun Shu's message would come again very soon, but who would have thought that half a year would quickly pass and Xiao Hua's cultivation would enter the early stage of the 16th layer of the Qi refining realm without any disturbances, and Sun Shu also didn't send any more messages. Could it be that senior sister Sun Shu has changed her mind again? Xiao Hua sat upright on the cloud bed in the cave, stretched his waist, and moved his muscles and bones, very satisfied as he thought to himself. The progress of his cultivation was completely dependent on the fire essence flame crystal, and it didn't matter much whether he went out to gain experience or not. If it wasn't for the fact that he had already promised someone at the Feather Immortal Gathering, he wouldn't have let go of the good time to cultivate. After resting for a moment, Xiao Hua flew out of the cave and looked around. At this time, the spiritual qi of heaven and earth in the eastern mountain range was even more tyrannical. The fire-type spiritual qi flowed wantonly, as if it was filled with violent emotions. Even the climate was somewhat hot, and many spiritual herbs had withered. Sigh, what exactly is going on here? Xiao Hua squatted down and looked at a withered spiritual herb. He thought helplessly, this is obviously because too much fire-type spiritual qi was poured in, and the water-type spiritual qi was insufficient. But why wasn't it so powerful 5 years ago? Then, Xiao Hua's heart shook. Could it be because of the fire essence flame crystal? But he immediately denied it. He was very clear that he had refined the fire essence flame crystal twice in the eastern mountain range, and every time, he had absorbed all the flames derived from the fire essence flame crystal into his body. This absorption was not controlled by him. His physical body, meridians, and bones were all actively absorbing the spiritual qi, leaving him only 10 to 20% for cultivation. No wonder no one dares to come here. This kind of tyrannical spiritual qi of heaven and earth, no one can smoothly absorb it into their body. They can't cultivate qi, and they can't even build their foundation. Xiao Hua straightened up, and his Buddhist awareness swept out. After observing for a long time, his expression changed slightly, and his figure floated up, flying towards a place where the fire-type spiritual qi was the most unstable. This is the place where I used the fire essence flame crystal that day. Xiao Hua stopped and looked at the traces of his earlier melting on the mountain and the destruction he had caused. He thought very strangely. Then, Xiao Hua clapped his hands, and the cloud-suppressing seal was used again. With a bang, it smashed into the ground, and the mountain within a radius of 1 zhang caved in, completely destroying the traces of the flames. After putting away the magic treasure, Xiao Hua extended his Buddhist awareness and looked underground. Unfortunately, even when he used his Buddhist awareness to its limit, there were still no clues. Strange, Xiao Hua put away his Buddhist awareness, but he didn't know that about 1,000 zhang underground, the collapsed space was wrapped in melted liquid, quietly staying underground. It was unknown how many zhang it had floated up compared to before. And about 100 zhang underground, there was also a layer of formation that Xiao Hua's Buddhist awareness could not detect, covering the entire eastern mountain range. Then, Xiao Hua simply didn't go back to his cave. He found a place to sit down and began to cultivate. Another 10 days passed like this. Xiao Hua suddenly opened his eyes, knowing that there was movement outside the formation. He used the token to open the formation, and 2 crimson-red messaging talismans flew in. Both came from Sun Lei Palace. One was from Sun Shu, and the other was naturally from Shui. Xiao Hua crushed Shui's messaging talisman, and Shui's resentful voice came from it. It turned out that Shui knew there was a chance to build her foundation this time, but she didn't know whether Xiao Hua would go or not. She was also afraid of distracting Xiao Hua and delaying his cultivation, so she didn't dare to rashly send a message. Moreover, a few years ago, the messaging talisman she sent to Xiao Hua often couldn't be sent, so she didn't send one. Until today, when she received her master's order to go into seclusion to cultivate, she heard from Sun Shu that Xiao Hua agreed to go with them, so she sent a message. Shue's words were full of exhortations, and she didn't complain in the slightest, but Xiaohua still felt uneasy. He explained the whole story clearly, and only said that he originally didn't have any plans. He didn't expect that he would fail to build his foundation, so he could only accompany Sun Shu and send out the messaging talisman. Sun Shu's message was simple. He only said that after 3 days, they would meet at Sky Thunder Peak. There wasn't a single extra word. After replying to Sun Shu's message, Xiaohua thought for a moment and decided to go to Myriad Thunder Valley to bid farewell to his master. Thus, he sealed the formation of the Eastern Mountain Range Medicine Garden and flew to Myriad Thunder Valley. You're tuning in to the Dreamy Chapters YouTube channel. We're so grateful for your support, and don't forget to subscribe to join us on this incredible journey through captivating stories. Your generosity through donations truly makes a world of difference, as it's the primary source of revenue that allows me to expand and enhance this channel for you. Thank you from the bottom of my heart for being a part of this adventure.